Chapter 726. With her twin ponytails pulled, Bloody Butterfly's eyes turned red from the pain. At that moment, she felt like a rabbit whose ears had been grabbed by a hunter. And the most frightening thing was that this hunter was going to cruelly cut off her ears. These twin ponytails were one of the magic weapons she was most proud of, and now she was actually going to have to say goodbye to them. Bloody Butterfly stared at the old devil in despair. At that moment, she felt that her life was bleak. As a national Red Dark Network wanted criminal, what was she going to face next? At that moment, crystalline tears welled up in the corners of Bloody Butterfly's eyes, but she didn't make a sound, because under the effect of the old devil's weakening halo, she didn't even have the strength to cry. Right now, Bloody Butterfly was facing a situation where it could only be slaughtered. Don't cry, my venerable self is most afraid of seeing a woman cry. The old devil stared at the tearful Bloody Butterfly with a complicated expression on his face. He suddenly recalled the scene when he had just met his wife, Yamai. In class back then, he had pulled Yamai's hair, and in the end, she had cried for the first time. Now that Bloody Butterfly was crying like a pear blossom in the rain, the old devil actually had the illusion that he was looking at his own wife. Bloody Butterfly had thought that after the old devil had vented his conscience, he would at least let her twin ponytails go. Who knew that the old devil's next words would make Bloody Butterfly completely despair? The old devil took a deep breath and said with a hint of longing in his voice, "When you cry, you look just like my wife. Can my venerable self dig out one of your eyes?" Bloody Butterfly was so scared that her tears instantly stopped. She finally realized why this old devil had been able to plunge the entire Huaxiao nation into black terror back then. "Mom, I want to go home." Elsewhere, Qingyu and Evil Sword God's pursuit was also going smoothly. They chased after Bloody Butterfly using the military magic swords that General Bai had given them. Because they were mass-produced by the military, they were all the same in terms of power, and even the sword spirits inside them had been artificially injected. This was an assembly line product, and certainly couldn't compare to custom-made magic swords. However, if the user was a swordsman, they could still unleash great power. Because they were both cultivators of the sword arts department, the two of them were very familiar with the method of riding a sword to chase. Furthermore, General Bai had unlocked Evil Sword God's purple investigative demon eyes this time. If Evil Sword God used it in this chase, those dozen or so foreign terrorists wouldn't be able to escape. Similarly, after Qingyu and Evil Sword God undid their transfiguration spells, these foreign powers and Dark Network mercenaries all cursed in their hearts at the same time. Why were these three big shots who had already been captured working together now? Evil Sword God was relentless in his pursuit. General Bai's original words were, if they could be captured alive, the reward would be full points. If these people resisted stubbornly during the pursuit, they would be executed on the spot, but if they ended up dead, the points would be halved. But Evil Sword God didn't care about this at all. Opening his purple investigative demon eyes, he went forward and started harvesting. In a temporary underground space, 12 people worked together to set up a barrier. They jointly cast an earth magic called the Earth Matrix, using the earth as the foundation to build a solid space. How could it be him? The dozen or so people couldn't help sweating. They had fled separately earlier, but because they were being chased by Evil Sword God, more and more of them slowly gathered together, planning to work together to think of a countermeasure. About 5 minutes ago, Evil Sword God had already killed 5 people, and had used the invisible sword chi in his left hand to skewer their heads one by one like candied haws. Although the barrier had already been set up, the immense pressure from Evil Sword God still made them feel like their throats were being strangled even though they were inside the barrier. However, these people didn't know that this wasn't Evil Sword God's peak state. Although General Bai had allowed the Mahjong squad to participate in the operation this time, he had still restricted the overall strength of the 3 of them. Currently, the Mahjong squad could only display less than 60% of their combined strength. But even so, the murderous aura that seemed to be able to destroy the world was still horrifying. Damn it. They were clearly invaders, but now they had to set up a barrier to save their lives. Evil Sword God has probably already been recruited, a man in white said in a low voice as he looked up with a deep gaze. He was also a member of the Dark Network, and like Bloody Butterfly, he was also a Red A wanted criminal. His nickname was Dark Descendant Coriander, or Dark Fragrance for short, and his real name was Killer Bunliang. Lord Dark Fragrance, what should we do? Someone asked nervously. Now that things have come to this, there's no other way. Only by using the barrier and the strength of all of us can we defend and counterattack. Lord Dark Fragrance, who was dressed in white, said slowly, since we can't win through strength, we might have a chance of survival if we have the advantage in numbers, a human wave tactic. They were all silent, lost in deep thought. Their average strength wasn't weak, and they were at level 3 of the soul formation stage. This was the manpower that Night Chief's overseas returnee elite group had been able to gather in a short time after the collective death of their group. But even if their average strength was at level 3 of the soul formation stage, it was still far from enough in the face of someone like Evil Sword God. Soul formation, itinerant immortal, true immortal. The gap between the three was like heaven and earth, and they were now like clay chickens and pottery dogs huddled in a dark cellar. This is our last chance. I suggest we listen to Lord Dark Fragrance, someone said at that moment. They looked at each other, and finally all their gazes fell on this Lord Dark Fragrance. The Dark Network man with the code name Dark Fragrance took a deep breath. First of all, I have to say that this is a forbidden spell. It will reduce your lifespan to a certain extent, but it won't be too serious. We need everyone to work together. Lord Dark Fragrance, please speak. We'll all listen to you, the 11 people said in unison. This man called Dark Fragrance said, there are about 37.2 trillion cells in the human body that work energetically every day. The function of this spell is to activate the cells, separate them from our bodies, and then summon the separated cells through a secret array. If used properly, the 12 of us together can summon an army of tens of thousands of cells. Hearing this, the 11 people were suddenly enlightened, because this Lord Dark Fragrance seemed to have originally been a biologist and was very familiar with the structure of human cells. An army of tens of thousands of cells? That's right. There's a white cell army as the main force, and even a priest army with platelets as the main force. Next, I'll summon platelets from my body and use them as the mother, to extract some of the cells from your bodies. Chapter 727. The Cells at Work spell was a forbidden spell that no one had ever seen before, and many of them had never even heard of it. After completing the hand seal, everyone in the underground barrier saw a curse slowly form on Lord Dark Fragrance's arm, and then he swiftly bit his index finger to carve a summoning array into the ground. The array wasn't large, but its composition bewildered a lot of people here, as it was a mixture of Eastern runes and Western curse seals. Some people speculated that this was probably a combination of Eastern and Western spells, or that it had come from the West and had finally been translated into Chinese. Sacrificing one's lifespan to separate cells, activate them, and summon them again, such a method was truly astonishing. About 10 seconds after the formation was formed, a crack appeared on the ground. Layers of dark red blood gushed out of the crack like a fountain of blood slowly gushing out. After that, the blood spring quickly retreated, leaving behind a bloody shadow. The bloody shadow gradually solidified, and a cute little loli wearing a red dress entered everyone's sight. That's right, this is the platelet in my body, the man called Dark Fragrance said. Summoning cells to fight requires a certain amount of preparation time. So we have to summon the platelet first and have it build an even more solid defensive barrier for us. In this way, we can stall for time and summon white blood cells and macrophages to fight. So that was it. Everyone instantly understood. As expected of Lord Dark Fragrance. As a Red A-class Dark Network wanted criminal, while he couldn't compare with 3S, class Red wanted criminals like the old devil, the master of Immortal Mansion and Evil Sword God. He had a lot more combat experience than them. And this summon platelet was too cute. It was just like his own daughter. This caused the people present to inexplicably feel a sense of fatherly love. If they could survive this time, they had to have a daughter later. Looking at their expressions as they stared at the platelet, Dark Fragrance spoke again. Next, I will use my platelet as the parent body. You will need to rely on the parent body to perform the secondary separation spell, which is much easier than the original spell. Please be sure to remember how to draw the secondary array. Okay. The 11 members of Night Chief nodded. At that moment, someone asked, Lord Dark Fragrance, will our platelets be as cute as yours? Yes. Because of the uniqueness of each person's body, the appearance of the summoned platelets may be different. This has a lot to do with the daily conditioning of the body. If you stay up late for a long time and put yourself in a subhealthy state, the summoned platelets may appear sick. As soon as he said that, Dark Fragrance saw several people's bodies tremble involuntarily. Some of them put their palms together and seemed to be praying. Ah! Great cultivation God, please bless my platelets to be more adorable. I promise. I will never top up money for Tianmei again. While the 11 Night Chief members were hiding underground with Dark Network member Dark Fragrance, Evil Sword God was also carefully searching for their whereabouts. Just a few minutes ago, these people's auras had all disappeared in an instant. Run. Can you escape? Evil Sword God looked at the human head skewered by invisible sword chi in his left hand and licked his lips. If it weren't for the fact that his abilities were restricted to only 60% of his strength, he would be able to find this group of people even if they hid at the ends of the earth. It was just that it was a little troublesome now. No one can hide from me. Evil Sword God slowly closed his eyes and pointed the candied haw in his left hand at the sky. At that moment, the world was quiet, and he seemed to be sensing something. In the distance, Qingyu, the master of Immortal Mansion, stood on a cliff and narrowed his eyes at Evil Sword God in the air. Sensing killing intent, Qingyu knew that this was a special skill that Evil Sword God had relied on to make his name, and it wasn't a spell. This was a special sensing skill that could only be accumulated by someone who had walked on the edge of hell all year round. By capturing the killing intent in the boundless world, he could lock onto his opponent. As long as you were on the opposite side of the battlefield, killing intent was bound to exist. No matter how well you hid it, it couldn't be erased. Especially now that you already knew who your opponent was. After capturing the killing intent, as long as you eliminated your own people, you would undoubtedly be the enemy. Was this Evil Sword God? The master of Immortal Mansion trembled with fear. This was only 60% of Evil Sword God's battle strength. How terrifying would he be at his peak? Furthermore, Evil Sword God, who had been enhanced by eyeshadow and had let loose, was in stark contrast to the Evil Sword God who had looked very weak in prison. Qingyu felt that it wouldn't be an exaggeration to describe this contrast as a monster. Raising his sword, Qingyu also concentrated his mental strength to the extreme. He then let go of the military magic sword in his hand, and it slowly floated behind him as if it had a mind of its own. So far, he had only caught some small fry, and the special Dark Network members with 500 points were now playing hide-and-seek. But Qingyu had his own way, which was to follow Evil Sword God from behind. The move he was best at was the thousandly sword art, which allowed him to use a spirit sword to take the head of an enemy general from a very long distance. Although this was quite unscrupulous behavior, stealing kills was indeed a feasible method at the moment. There weren't many points for this operation, but as the saying went, every little makes a mickle. Every little he could fight for was naturally a little, and could be used as a bargaining chip to reduce his sentence in the future. At that moment, he saw Evil Sword God slowly open his eyes in the air and point at a piece of land dozens of li away. Hiding underground. Only children would hide underground. The group of people who had fled from Evil Sword God had already been tracked down. But just as Evil Sword God was about to make his move to reap the harvest, the whole fake remains unexpectedly shook at that moment. Earthquake. Evil Sword God and Qing Yu were both puzzled. Everything in these fake remains was fake, including some natural factors. Logically speaking, it was unlikely that there would be an earthquake, unless it was man-made. While the two of them were pondering this, there was a loud bang, and the ground that Evil Sword God was staring at suddenly cracked open, covered in blood. A humanoid monster that was dozens of meters tall and looked like a giant Godzilla beast actually crawled out of the ground. Everyone was inexplicably shaken at this scene. One by one, the Huaxiao Alliance cultivators stopped their pursuit. They could sense the aura of this blood-red monster from afar. What's this? Could it be a blood demon? But, why would a blood demon appear here? Elsewhere, in the underground barrier set up by Night Chief, that Lord Dark Fragrance was also frightened by this blood-red monster. More than 10 people simultaneously stared at a fatty. This blood-red monster was none other than this fatty's platelet, Lord Dark Fragrance. How was this a platelet? It was a far cry from the cute little loli that Lord Dark Fragrance had summoned. Was this AF*** King cerebral thrombosis? Chapter 728. In the fake remains, a blood-colored humanoid monster that was dozens of meters tall slowly stood up from the ground, and a thick, dark red liquid dripped from its body like magma. This wasn't magma, but more like a syrup-like substance. Because the fatty's blood sugar was on the high side, this humanoid platelet that had been summoned was actually very sticky. When the viscous liquid dripped from its body to the ground, it immediately stirred up the earth. No matter what it is, take it down. A Huaxiao Alliance cultivator made a move and flew his flying sword in an attempt to kill this giant blood-colored monster from behind. In the end, he was sent flying by the sticky liquid that sprayed from the monster's body. Ah! The cultivator let out a blood-curdling scream as he was directly smashed into a mountain wall in the distance. Although he only suffered some superficial injuries, his whole body was imprisoned by the mucus. This mucus was extremely sugary. What on earth is this? On the other side, the old devil, master of Immortal Mansion Qing Yu, Evil Sword God in general by all noticed this monster, but they had no idea what it was. This is 7,364. This is 7,364. Other Huaxiao Alliance cultivators started to call headquarters to ask about this monster's origin. In fact, General Yi and the others in Huaxiao Alliance's command center were also alarmed by this giant blood-colored monster that had suddenly appeared in the fake remains. Oldie, what do you think? President Qi stared at the image on the screen, his mind churning as he tried to think of something. However, General Yi shook his head. It looks a little like a blood devil, but it doesn't look like one. The only thing we can be sure of is that this thing was summoned. If we can defeat the summoner, it might disappear. President Qi crossed his arms and narrowed his eyes. Can you analyze the substance? This fake remains was a fictional small world that was completely under Huaxiao Alliance's control, so it had a certain ability to analyze the substance of the world. When President Qi spoke, the staff at the command center had already started to analyze the creature. This process was very fast, and only took a few seconds to complete. Finally, the composition of the blood-colored giant was listed in a table and displayed on the screen. Because it had already taken human form, there was water, sugar, fat and other substances in the monster, but there was one substance that made up 70% of it. Platelet. A lot of people were astonished when they saw the results of the report. So, had the platelets become sentient? What's the overall strength of this cerebral thrombosis? President Qi asked. The researchers were blank when they heard this. Cerebral thrombosis. There didn't seem to be anything wrong, such a big lump couldn't be called a platelet at all. It's already been analyzed. His overall strength is that of a loose immortal. He should be at the 3rd stage, a staff member replied. 3rd level itinerant. It looks like this thing has a parent, and its strength has been enhanced by radiation. President Chi immediately made this judgment. If it was just an ordinary summon, its realm and strength would not be so ferocious. The only possibility was that the crimson monster had a parent. The parent was constantly providing energy for it, and in the end, the overall strength of the monster became stronger. There was actually a special term for such a situation during the summoning process. It was called parent radiation. As a wisdom saint, President Chi had already come to a conclusion. Furthermore, there is a biologist on the list of Dark Network members recruited by Night Chief this time, so everything makes sense. General Yi frowned. If it's as you say, old Chi, there's actually no point in simply defeating this monster. President Chi nodded and then said to the staff member at the command platform, tell them that they must find the mother, otherwise this blood-colored monster will keep regenerating. Platelets were cells that could stop bleeding to begin with. Now that they had formed this behemoth, their self-healing ability was naturally top-notch. At that moment, the situation in the fake remains wasn't optimistic. After the appearance of this huge blood-colored monster, several smaller blood-colored monsters emerged from the ground on the side. Although they weren't as big as this cerebral thrombosis, they were still 10 meters tall. They seemed to be guarding something. With the tallest cerebral thrombosis monster as the center, the 7 monsters lined up to form a human wall. Their bodies were covered in a blood-red color with a high sugar content, causing ripples to form on the surface. Their intention was very obvious, and that was to tell everyone, no one was allowed to pass ahead. General Bai narrowed his eyes at the 7 monsters and gave everyone an order. Everyone, don't waste time on these monsters. We have to find the summoner and the mother as soon as possible. After learning that this was a spell called the Cells at Work spell, General Bai immediately understood the importance of time. These 7 monsters were only here to stall for time, their real purpose was probably to summon more cells. If they waited until the white blood cells and macrophages were summoned in human form, the situation would truly be difficult to resolve. Given their current numbers, it might be difficult for them to withstand the rampage of tens of thousands of monsters. Furthermore, this was a huge limitation for General Bai himself. As Explosion Saint, all he could do when the time came was to get rid of all the monsters in one go. Given his current strength, he could blow up the entire fake remains. But when that time really came, his Huaxiao Alliance colleagues would suffer together with him. I'll subdue these 7 monsters. Everyone, hurry up and find the summoner and the mother. They should be hiding underground. Thinking this, General Bai clenched his teeth and soared into the sky, charging toward the largest cerebral thrombosis monster. General Bai spread open his fingers, and an energy cannon shot out from his palm. Explosions were art. Boom! The head of the largest cerebral thrombosis monster was blown off. But it wasn't long before, as President Chi had predicted, after the monster's head was blown off, the mucus on its body swiftly accumulated on its neck and finally formed a new head. The largest one now was codenamed Cerebral Thrombosis, and was a level 3 itinerant immortal. The second was the 15-meter platelet and was a level 2 itinerant immortal. Because its overall color was a little different from the other monsters, it was yellowish and looked very oily, so this 15-meter platelet was codenamed Fatty Liver. The third was 12 meters tall and was a level 1 itinerant immortal. It was a little smaller than the previous 2, but its chest was extremely large, and it was codenamed Myocardial Infarction. Looking at this scene from a distance, the old devil felt that all these platelets were mutated species, although the remaining 4 weren't as big as the previous 3, with an average height of only 5 to 7 meters. It was precisely because they were skinnier that they had the shape of their faces. Thus, 2 of them looked more fierce and sluggish, and were codenamed Brainless and Unhappy. Of the remaining 2, one was big and the other small. Chapter 729. These were almost deformed humanoid platelets that had been manipulated by humans. Furthermore, it was very clear that they were the type with low IQ. Because they were so large and deformed, their brains had directly mutated. The activated humanoid cells summoned by the cells at work spell should be like the parent platelets summoned by Lord Dark Fragrance, who were very good-looking little Lolas. But it was very clear that these Night Chief cultivators' lives were generally very chaotic, and they lacked proper care, which led to this current situation. Whether it was cultivators or ordinary people, they all needed to pay attention to proper care in their daily lives. While cultivators could go several days without eating or drinking, this was in fact very draining, and it wasn't like there were no side effects. A proper balance between work and rest was the way of the king. But then again, these deformed mutated platelets weren't completely useless. Although they had very low IQ, they had an unexpectedly remarkable defensive effect. It looked like he would have to find a few fat shut-ins to cooperate with him when he used this spell in the future. Lord Dark Fragrance pondered this scene in his heart. Lord Dark Fragrance, can we hold them off? Someone asked nervously. They could already hear the continuous rumbling and explosions coming from above. Furthermore, a true immortal's pressure pressed down on their hearts like 1,000-kilogram weight from beginning to end. The legendary head of the 10 generals, Explosion Saint General Bai, the members of Night Chief and the Dark Network hadn't expected Huaxiao Nation to actually step up their arrangements this time and have the head of the 10 generals personally come out to wipe out outsiders like them. If it wasn't for the extremely strong self-healing abilities of these mutated platelets, they really wouldn't have been able to withstand this pressure. Not only that, in addition to this Explosion Saint, there were also the 3 prison bigwigs who had been arrested a while ago, the Old Devil, Master of Immortal Mansion Qing Yu and Evil Sword God, waiting for them outside. This battle could truly be said to be a gathering of experts. In order to protect the real remains and eliminate foreign forces at the same time, Huaxiao Nation had really spared no expense this time. Furthermore, it was very likely that they wanted to catch them all in one fell swoop. It's not over yet. The opponents were indeed very troublesome, but Lord Dark Fragrance and the members of Night Chief didn't want to give up. Lord Dark Fragrance took the initiative to control the magic array as he concentrated. It's almost done. The summoning of the activated white blood cells, macrophages and red blood cells is almost complete. I just need a little more time. As long as he could successfully summon these activated cells for battle. The combat ability of the white blood cells was very strong, and with the blessing of the matrix halo of the platelets, it had a very strong recovery ability. Nullifies normal physical attacks. Except for the Old Devil and Explosion Saint, almost everyone else was using swordsmanship. The white blood cells could delay most people. As for magical damage, he could only rely on the summoned macrophages to absorb it. When that time came, it would be time for them to fight back and escape. Of course, even if the plan succeeded, he could still escape. This time, someone was bound to be sacrificed. But as for which unlucky worm it would be, that would depend on one's luck and fortune. Of course, this was all in the future. On the other side, General Bai, the Songhai Prison Mahjong Squad and the cultivators from Huaxiao Alliance who were participating in the battle were all in a bitter struggle. A lot of Huaxiao Alliance cultivators were stuck to the platelet mucus and couldn't move at all. Once someone's movements were restricted, there would inevitably be others who would come to their aid. This mucus was extremely sticky, and at the moment, washing it with water talismans was the best countermeasure. But the problem was that they hadn't expected this kind of situation to occur in the battle this time. The water talismans that the entire Huaxiao Alliance squad and the fake remains had on hand weren't enough. At a time like this, someone proficient in magic had to make talismans on the spot. Instantly, a lot of people turned to look at the Old Devil. In the air, General Bai once again released several giant mushroom eggs to blow up the bodies of the 7 deformed platelets. Considering the current situation of the battle, it wasn't the right time to use a more destructive explosion spell on a larger scale, since there were Huashio Alliance members trapped in the mucus. They had to wait until everyone was rescued. I'll hold them off here, you go draw talismans. While the 7 platelets were recovering, General Bai spoke telepathically to the old devil from 1,000 li away. The old devil pointed at himself, a little unable to believe that he had been called out. My venerable self. He was Devil Emperor Guo Pai. A Grand Devil Emperor actually had to lower himself to draw talismans. If word got out, it would definitely be a joke. 1 talisman, 5 points. Yes, boss. The old devil was instantly motivated. Everyone, they hadn't brought many water talismans, but Huashio Alliance had prepared a lot of materials for drawing talismans. Carrying talisman-making materials on one's person was an essential item for every cultivator to survive in the wild. This was in order to deal with situations like this. Many a time, it was impossible to predict which talismans would be used, so carrying materials on one's person in a situation like this was a good insurance policy. Although there was a certain chance of failure in drawing talismans, if they could find a cultivator proficient in magic, that would be the best of both worlds. This would guarantee both quality and success. But the problem now was that it had been a very long time since the old devil had drawn talismans. From the day he had become a devil, the low-level work of drawing talismans had always been handled by his subordinates. Never in his wildest dreams did the old devil expect that one day he would actually be reduced to drawing talismans for other people. While the old devil was pondering this, some Huashio Alliance members had already prepared the materials: spirit water, cinnabar, talisman paper and talisman brushes, and even a small table for drawing talismans. We're all in the same boat, the most important thing is to work and earn points. Master of Immortal Mansion Qingyu landed next to the old devil and sighed. For some reason, Qingyu felt a little envious. For them, points might mean freedom in the future, although each of them might be sentenced to more than several thousand years in prison. In the end, every little bit added up. The old devil picked up the talisman brush and smiled bitterly. My venerable self has never been in this kind of situation before, I'll just treat it as accumulating experience. At that moment, the old devil suddenly understood Wang Ling's state of mind a little. An expert state of mind for doing things and learning in a low-key manner. The old devil couldn't help muttering to himself, it turns out that the young big shot who scared my venerable self half to death back then tempered his state of mind in this kind of environment, and finally became a big shot. The old devil didn't pay attention to what he said, but Qingyu's eyes widened when he heard it. Although they had been sent to prison one by one before, none of them had mentioned how they had been caught. In fact, the most crucial factor was that young big shot. Hence, when Qingyu heard this, he instantly felt that something wasn't right. Young big shot, wait. Qingyu couldn't help speaking telepathically to the old devil. The old devil. Qingyu stared at the old devil. Which big shot is this young big shot you're talking about? Don't tell me he's the same person who caught me. At that moment, the old devil also had an unfathomable expression on his face. The hell? Chapter 730. While the battle in the fake remains was in full swing, it was peaceful inside the real remains. This was the calm before the storm. Wang Ling followed the rest of the group to tour the base station inside the real remains. There were a lot of extinct resource samples collected here, and all kinds of spirit plants were an eye-opener. Each spirit plant was individually protected, and the temperature in the incubators was controlled by a layer at the most suitable temperature for the spirit plant to grow. The one that left the deepest impression on everyone was a spirit plant called Fire Lotus Hybrid. In its normal state, this Fire Lotus Hybrid was pure white, like a white lotus that had grown out of the mud without being stained. However, as the temperature continued to rise, the petals of the white lotus would slowly begin to wither away. But despite its withered appearance, the white lotus wouldn't die right away. Despite its extremely withered appearance, it still maintained a tenacious vitality. In the end, the White Lotus completed an ultimate evolution that transcended the mundane world, and became a true Fire Lotus hybrid. The Fire Lotus hybrid ignored high temperatures and could survive in extremely hot environments. At the end of its life, it would even directly ovulate in its surroundings to give birth to a new White Lotus. Wang Ming had deliberately separated from Wang Ling in order to prevent those two aristocratic young masters from finding Wang Ling. Li Mingyao and Zhou Yujing weren't idle either. As they observed the spirit plants, they didn't forget to look for an opportunity to ask teacher Wang Xiao'er's room number in the rainbow glass box. They really wanted to apologize. "Student, do you know which area and number teacher Wang Xiao'er's room is in?" While they were observing, Li Mingyao suddenly put his arm around Little Peanut's shoulder. Little Peanut nodded. "You mean teacher Wang?" "I know." Hearing this, Li Mingyao and Zhou Yujing were delighted. But because this matter concerned Wang Ling, Little Peanut very quickly lost his memory under the effect of the great shielding spell. Which room does teacher Wang live in?" Li Mingyao and Zhou Yujing. After a moment, Little Peanut scratched his head. "Sorry, I forgot." Li Mingyao and Zhou Yujing. Perhaps everyone had this kind of experience. Sometimes, 1 second they wanted to say something, but in the next second, they suddenly forgot what they wanted to say. Therefore, it was not that Li Mingyao and Zhou Yujing could not understand. The point was that Little Peanut was already the 8th person they had asked. Moreover, everyone's reaction at the start was to show that they knew, but in the blink of an eye, they forgot about it. What the hell? In the afternoon, the plan for the real ruins was to visit a forest in the east. This time, the research team was directly divided into 2 groups. One of them was responsible for the development of the western region. Now, only the eastern half of the ruins had been explored, and the western region was still in a blank stage. To put it bluntly, this summer camp was just an activity for the students to broaden their horizons. The real purpose was to study and protect Beast King's remains. It was rare for Beast King's remains to be opened, so the research team naturally had to firmly grasp this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Apart from the scientific research team that went to explore the West, about 1/3 of the remaining scientific research team followed the students and teachers. No one knew more about the spiritual plants in the East than the experts of the scientific research team. There were 2 reasons for following the students. One was to make it easier to explain knowledge to the students. The other was to protect the students' safety. In case a student was accidentally poisoned while observing the forest, the team of experts would be able to coordinate with the medical team as quickly as possible and give them advice on how to deal with the situation. There was also an activity in the forest in the afternoon that all the students were looking forward to. Setting up tents. A summer camp without tents was soulless. But considering the environment, Huaxiao Alliance had in fact specially prepared special camping tents for the students' safety. The main reason why the students weren't allowed to bring their own tents was because they were worried that their own tents wouldn't be safe enough and could easily cause danger. All of a sudden, the students in the summer camp were instantly in high spirits. The joy of setting up tents together wasn't something that could be experienced on a camping trip alone. In particular, setting up tents with people you were familiar with, close to, or even liked was doubly fun. But the students were happily setting up tents here. On the other side, 2 people were fretting. One of them was President Dylan, who was mixed in with the medical team. President Dylan had just received intelligence that the members of Night Chief and the Dark Network who had been sent out in the fake remains this time would most likely be wiped out in one fell swoop. Unlike the previous times, this was an almost unprecedented blow, and President Dylan was lost in deep thought. Because of the real and fake remains, the reserve army that President Dylan had temporarily set up after taking over the mess President Bai had left behind had already lost half its fighting strength. If this situation continued to develop, it wouldn't be good for them. President Dylan looked at the young man in the white coat in front of him with a gloomy gaze. This was their bargaining chip. Given the current situation, President Dylan felt that they couldn't delay any longer. They had to act as soon as possible. Apart from President Dillon, the other person who was fretting was Wang Ming. The military tent used by the teachers was a compressed version that had already been set up, and could be used as soon as they were taken out. At that moment, Wang Ming was debugging Head of State 001. Although Head of State 001 was currently invisible, this summer camp was its first test run. As the designer who had personally designed the blueprints for Head of State 001 back then, this test run was of great significance to Wang Ming. But somehow, Wang Ming felt that this Head of State 001 was a little different from the one he had originally designed. There wasn't much difference in its overall functions, and it was very obedient to his commands. But the main problem was that this Head of State 001 seemed to be especially intelligent. Even some of the details were slowly revealed. For example, the fluttering of its eyelids, the trembling of its eyelashes. If it was just a humanoid magic treasure, these subtle expressions shouldn't be this precise. In the military tent, Wang Ming stared at the Head of State pretending to be Head of State 001. The Head of State, the more he stared, the more incredulous Wang Ming felt. Because after staring for a while, he realized that this Head of State 001 was actually breaking out in a cold sweat. Oh my! Was this an evolution of artificial intelligence? Wang Ming turned pale with shock. This was a great discovery. Chapter 731. There was something wrong with Head of State 001. This was Wang Ming's first judgment after recording it in his little notebook. Furthermore, he was now wondering if there was a possibility that number 001 had been replaced. The current Head of State 001 was really too intelligent. Moreover, many details that had not been tested before were vividly restored. That was a little unrealistic. In the military tent, Wang Ming's gaze carefully swept over this slightly unusual Head of State. After a while, Wang Ming suddenly shouted at the Head of State, "Activate! Super transformation!" The Head of State was stunned for a moment. Did Head of State 001 still have such an operation? But he still followed Wang Ming's request and forcibly activated the super transformation form. After Wang Ming gave the order, the Head of State's figure suddenly grew several inches, and in front of Wang Ming's eyes, he impressively turned into a muscular man. For the time being, this could be considered a super transformation, right? However, Wang Ming had a look of sudden realization on his face at this scene. As expected, there was a problem with this Head of State 001. The original version of Head of State 001 that he had designed did not have a super transformation form. On the other side, the battle at the fake ruins continued. The old devil was indeed the old devil. As the ancient devil emperor who had plunged the entire Huaxiao nation into black terror back then, and a veteran tank mage with the power to fight at both close and far range, he was able to quickly mass-produce water talismans. Moreover, these water talismans were extremely powerful. One of them was equivalent to 5 of the original ones. Water talismans rescued the Huaxiao Alliance cultivators who had been trapped by the mucus on the deformed platelets one after another. General Bai, together with the Master of Immortal Mansion and Evil Sword God, hovered in the air. With Evil Sword God and Qingyu, the Master of Immortal Mansion, protecting them, General Bai was determining the scope of the explosion. After General Bai confirmed that the last trapped Huaxiao Alliance member within range of the explosion had been successfully rescued, he immediately flung out the inescapable net from his sleeve in order not to implicate the innocent. Go! General Bai manipulated the inescapable net to cover Platelet's head. This was a limited edition magic weapon, just like the 3 views shattering hammer which Wang Ling had specially forged for Immortal Jinyuan. However, it was only effective once. After the inescapable net was thrown out, it immediately formed a powerful net-like boundary, enclosing the 7 deformed platelets in it. Because his allies had been trapped previously, General Bai had been somewhat restrained in the explosions. This time, General Bai was going to display true art. As if sensing the heavy murderous intent in the air, the 7 deformed platelets that were standing dumbly on the spot roared at this moment. They had foreseen a crisis. This was also a kind of signal. It was a direct feedback to the summoner that they couldn't hold on any longer. In the underground barrier, Lord Dark Fragrance didn't even frown when he heard the platelets roar. He knew that it was clearly unrealistic to rely on just 7 platelets to stop Washio Alliance. What was more, there was a true immortal keeping watch this time, and furthermore, it was Explosion Saint, the head of the 10 generals. Lord Dark Fragrance was already very satisfied with being able to stall for so much time. Next to Lord Dark Fragrance, the expression of that adorable and well-behaved little Lolita changed drastically at that moment. The mental pressure that the 7 deformed platelets felt was ultimately transmitted to the parent body. The connection between the platelets and the parent body was connected. In theory, as long as the parent body wasn't destroyed, the 7 deformed platelets would continue to survive, provided that there was still room for the 7 deformed platelets. It didn't need to be much, just a little bit of tissue and cells to completely recover. But if the 7 deformed platelets suffered heavy injuries that they couldn't bear and were annihilated in one go, the parent body would be implicated and die along with them. It's almost done. Lord Dark Fragrance knew that the platelets were most likely doomed at this point. He concentrated even more. Just a little bit more. If there was a progress bar, 95% of the summoning process would already be complete. Just 5% more, and the army of white blood cells and macrophages would arrive on the battlefield. All the Night Chief members in the underground barrier shivered as they sensed the powerful killing intent permeating the air. This power was too strong. Was this the power of a true immortal? They had never directly felt the pressure of a true immortal before. Even in Night Chief, the only people who had the right to meet Lord Night Ghost Spirit Emperor, who was also a true immortal, were the internal core president bigwigs and the members of the headquarters. Most people had never experienced the true power of a true immortal. Hence, several Night Chief cultivators couldn't help trembling with fear. A true immortal expert, was this what it felt like to be oppressed by someone with the strongest realm in the world? At that moment, they felt like children who had just come out of a rural village and had just seen the big world, only now realizing how small their horizons had been. Compared with a true immortal, they really were a bunch of laughable frogs at the bottom of a well. The barrier was complete. In the air, General Bai took a deep breath and started to assume a fighting stance that looked like he was about to explode. Seeing this scene, many of the Huaxiao Alliance members immediately knew that General Bai was going to step it up. Standing in the air, General Bai put his palms together. Dozens of seconds later, a ball of golden energy gathered in his hands. He clamped down on this ball of energy and slowly pushed it to his waist. This was the standard posture for accumulating power. Ha! Ha! In a short 5 or 6 seconds, countless chi instantly swirled around this golden energy ball, which grew larger and larger. He's going to fire. A lot of people held their breaths as they watched this scene. In the next moment, General Bai roared, and the energy ball in his hand instantly turned into a golden flood that shot forward like a destructive ray of death. When it hit the ground, all the trees within a radius of 100 li were instantly destroyed, and a huge mushroom cloud rose up. Thick, billowing smoke was firmly trapped within the inescapable net barrier. Many people felt the violent tremors coming from the ground, and were inexplicably alarmed. If it hadn't been for the inescapable net barrier, General Bai's attack just now would have probably spread thousands of li. At that time, the entire fake remains would probably be in trouble. After firing the shot, General Bai heaved a long sigh. He had already controlled the range of the explosion, otherwise at least 70% of the fake remains would have been destroyed by this shot. Although these were fake remains, a lot of resources had been expended in order to capture this group of foreign rebels this time. Thus, the fake remains were public property. As one of the 10 generals, General Bai had to consider protecting public property to the best of his ability, and ultimately recycling it. Environmental protection. Chapter 732. The earth quaked and the mountains shook with this blast. Thick billowing smoke covered the entire inescapable net barrier and didn't disperse for a long time, making it impossible to see what on earth was happening inside. The only thing they could be sure of was that this blast just now had directly flattened the ground, and all the trees within a 100-kilometer radius of the inescapable net had been blown to smithereens, leaving nothing behind. This was a true immortal blast. This was the power of General Bai's blast. The old devil broke out in a cold sweat when he saw this scene. In fact, the fact that the whole of Huaxiao nation had been enveloped in Devil Emperor Guo Pai's black terror back then was just an exaggerated legend. Although his breaking into the national palace in search of the Wheel of Time had indeed been a hot topic for a very long time, it definitely wasn't as terrifying as the rumors made it out to be. After all, he had suffered a lot back then in order to deal with Blade Master Yi Jianchuan and General Yi. It was only when he had been stirring up trouble back then that General Bai had been in seclusion. Otherwise, the old devil believed that even at his peak, he wouldn't have been able to take much advantage of this level of explosive power. General Bai was ranked first among the 10 generals in terms of fighting strength, and General Yi was ranked third. It had already been very difficult for the old devil to deal with third. It would have been really hard to say what the outcome would have been if he had really gone up against this first general. As he recalled what had happened back then, the old devil couldn't help sweating in his heart. But to be honest, he had always felt that this General Bai didn't give him as much pressure as that youngster back then. Although that youngster hadn't used any heaven-defying tricks in front of him back then, that youngster had indeed played a crucial role in the old devil's eventual capture. In his overall plan back then, one had been the Yang absorption array to turn people around, and the other had been the array to summon the gate between worlds. Both of these arrays had been crucial. But because of that youngster, his entire plan had failed. To this day, the old devil couldn't forget the scene of that youngster closing the gate between worlds on his own. Even now, the old devil couldn't help shuddering at the thought. Seeing the deep expression on the old devil's face as he drew the talisman, Qing Yu immediately knew that the old devil had most likely thought of something bad. After a moment, the old devil raised his head and looked at Qing Yu. "I want to know, how many slaps did Brother Qing get when you were arrested?" Qing Yu's face instantly darkened. "How many have you been beaten up?" The old devil thought back carefully. "For the time being, I'll be one." After saying that, the old devil looked up at Evil Sword God, who was in an extremely excited state in the air. "I heard that when this friend was sent in, he was beaten up 3 times. Qing Yu's face darkened even further. He wasn't hit at all. Because back then, it was Jinke who had dealt with him the entire time. That night, the activity in the real ruins was a picnic. The teacher who led the team distributed a simplified version of the Spirit Plant Handbook to all the students. This handbook covered all the poisonous and dangerous spirit plants that the students might come into contact with in this summer camp. After that, after each group set up their own tents, they began to assign little ancestors to carry out the picnic activities. Everyone needed to use the resources in the forest to cook. Basically, it was just wild game stew. There were extinct resources in Beast King's remains, as well as spirit plants that had been cultivated relatively well. The reason why this forest had been chosen was that many of the spirit plants here had been brought in from the outside world by the expedition team back then. The spirit soil in this forest was very fertile, and contained a lot of trace elements that couldn't be found in the outside world. The Research Institute had been analyzing their specific composition over the years, but had yet to crack it. It was precisely these trace elements that allowed many spirit plants that couldn't grow in the outside world to effectively multiply and grow here. Thus, Huaxiao Alliance had taken into account the resources that the students would consume for this picnic. Back then, they had sown enough seeds here, and using some of them up would actually be more beneficial for the growth of spirit plants. Super Chin, Little Peanut, Wang Ling and Dopey Guo were in the same team. The 4 of them moved together and came to a stream. Standing on a rock, Super Chin put his hands on his hips and took a deep breath. Have you noticed? I feel that the soil here is very different. It's very relaxing, it's especially refreshing. Little Peanut nodded. It does indeed have a very special smell. It's quite refreshing. The soil here isn't ordinary. You don't know this, but it's actually edible, Dopigwa said. Edible? That's right. Dopigwa, I asked a teacher at the research institute just now, and he said that the soil is rich in nutrients and doesn't have any bacteria. It's completely edible. Of course, although it's edible, I heard that it tastes terrible, like chewing salt, and it's very irritating to the throat. Wang Ling, Little Peanut scooped up a handful of soil and sniffed it. This spirit soil had an indescribable aroma. If Dopigwa hadn't said anything, he really would have had the urge to eat it. While the picnic was going on, several streaks of light descended from the sky on the other side and arrived at the entrance to the Forest of Remains. Led by Wuji, the special operations team that Audjua had set up had arrived, and they directly landed here. Fatty Luo was extremely excited. My God, is this the real Remains? It was normal for him to be excited. Devil Valley's Beast King's Remains was the place that cultivators all over the country had voted to visit and broaden their horizons the most over the years. But because the entrance was only open in Huaxiu Nation, and most of the resources in the secret land were strictly controlled by Huaxiu Nation, coupled with the fact that there were all kinds of extinct resources growing inside, it was almost impossible to get a glimpse of it. The only way was to pass the academician exam of Huaxiu's Academy of Cultivation and Magic Treasures. As long as they passed the exam, they would have the opportunity to enter the secret land with the team when the Remains opened. This bunch of kids got lucky. At the entrance to the forest, Audjua couldn't help smiling. This summer camp was really a rare opportunity, especially for this bunch of lucky high school students. Just the fact that they had a summer camp in Beast King's Remains was enough for them to brag about for a year. Let's go in. Audjua said at the entrance. He could already smell Shifu. Shifu was inside. But before meeting Shifu, Audjua thought it would be better to find Wu Zhenjuan, who was leading the team, and explain their situation. Fatty Luo was full of excitement. As soon as his front foot stepped into the forest soil, Little Silver immediately cried out in alarm, "Oh! Slow down! Don't step on it!" Fatty Luo was startled. Is the soil here also an extinct resource? That's not it. Little Silver quickly shook his head, then pinched his nose. This is Devil King shit. Chapter 733. Little Silver's answer immediately stupefied everyone. Before entering Beast King's Remains, Audjua had done his homework. He had specially studied the eastern part of the map which the scientific research team had already explored in Beast King's Remains before this operation. Thus, Audjua knew that the soil in this forest was now of edible quality. This was actually no secret. When the scientific research team had explored Beast King's Remains the last time, they had already published information on the National Authoritative Scientific Data website. It was said that in order to confirm the practicality of the soil, the scientific research team had specially invited the gourmet Yuan Zhou to taste it. After eating the soil, Yuan Zhou said that after eating it, his eyes were clearer than before, his back was more comfortable, and even his skin seemed to be a lot more delicate than before. The strong effects were immediately apparent after eating it. However, after eating it, Yuan Zhou also said that if the unpalatability was graded from 1 to 10, this soil could be graded to 11, so before coming to the Remains, Audjua had actually been quite curious about how unpalatable this soil was, and had wanted to try it out. But now that he heard Little Silver say this, he immediately broke out in a cold sweat. Why are you so sure? Audjua asked Little Silver. Little Silver pinched his nose and said, if a human cultivator smells this soil, it should be very, very fragrant. But we grew up in Holy Beast Village, and everyone comes into contact with Devil King during the village meetings every year. If we come into contact with Devil King and then smell this soil, it will become very smelly. Like shit. After saying this, Little Silver felt that his words were a little ambiguous, so he hurriedly corrected himself. No, it's shit to begin with. Jua, then why did Devil King leave a pile of it here? Little Silver casually tapped his nose aperture to seal his sense of smell, then crossed his arms with the expression of someone who knew. The remains were originally Devil King's tomb. When he built the tomb back then, Devil King considered a lot of feng shui issues. He had special plans for some spirit plants and so on. It was also because of feng shui issues that His Majesty Beast King decided to build an entire forest. But in order to build the forest, His Majesty Beast King also suffered a lot. Could it be because these trees can only grow in this soil? Fatty Luo deduced. That's one of the reasons, but that's not the hardest part. Little Silver nodded and then said, in order to build this forest, His Majesty Beast King worked the hardest on storing shit. Everyone, for some reason, Chua suddenly realized that he could no longer bear to look at the fragrant soil on the ground. The evening cookout was basically a DIY meal for the students under the guidance of the teacher leading the team. Most of the teams used local ingredients to make vegetable and spirit fruit soup, and the taste of the soup depended on the students' own combination. The teacher leading the team was nothing more than helping to keep an eye on the students to see if any students would mix poisonous spirit plants into the soup to make the soup. It wouldn't be a big deal even if they found out, but the experience of this summer camp would also count towards their overall learning points. If they mixed poisonous spirit plants into the mix, their points would be deducted and that would be it. And this comprehensive branch would directly affect the evaluation of high school graduation. As they gathered the spirit fruit, Little Peanut came up with a lot of ideas, but Super Chin and Dopey-gwa didn't have much of an appetite. The reason was that while they were gathering the fruit, they couldn't resist the temptation of the fragrant soil under their feet and couldn't help eating a bit, but in the end, they almost threw it up. This scene reminded Wang Ling of a very magical lyric. Have you ever eaten fragrant roasted gluten, soil? The truth was that it wasn't just Super Chin and Dopey-gwa who had fallen for it. There were also quite a number of students in the team who couldn't resist the temptation of this edible soil and couldn't help sneaking a mouthful of it. Even now, they still felt a little nauseous. In Super Chen's words, this stuff was as salty as dried salted fish that had been fermented in Laotan pickled cabbage beef noodles for 1,000 years. It was salty and fishy. It was a world of difference from the smell. And it was precisely because of this smell that a lot of the students directly lost their appetites that night. While Wang Ling and Little Peanut were preparing their vegetable and fruit soup, they saw a number of students from number 60 high school and other schools leaning against a tree, clutching their stomachs with deathly pale faces, as if they had nothing left to live for. Luckily, I didn't eat it. Little Peanut trembled in fear at this scene and couldn't help trembling. Because Super Chin and Dopey-gwa had stopped cooking midway, Wang Ling and Little Peanut were the ones who mainly collected the ingredients this time. In fact, it was Little Peanut who was mainly responsible for selecting and gathering the ingredients. When the team returned, Little Peanut was carrying a bamboo basket on his back, which was filled with spirit plants that didn't look very good. Feather Lin, who had come to visit next door, complained, "What did you choose?" She picked up a strange spirit plant that looked a little like a carrot, black, purple and green, and couldn't help showing a suspicious expression on her face. Can this thing be eaten? It's so ugly. Little Peanut pursed his lips. This soil smells fragrant, but it's so unpalatable. We've already had two. When things reach an extreme, they turn in the opposite direction, understand? Ugly things don't necessarily taste bad. Stinky tofu smells bad but tastes good. Feather Lin was instantly speechless after this explanation. Then, it was time to wash the vegetables and boil the soup. Because this team lacked the two important laborers, Super Chin and Dopey-gwa, the entire process was relatively slow. When Wang Ling set up the pot, he could already see the aroma of a delicious soup wafting in front of the military tent not far away. The soup had an indescribable aroma, and it drifted very far. Even Super Chin and Dopigua, who were leaning against the tree, felt much less nauseous after eating the soil. Everyone's appetites were almost instantly whetted. Who made the soup? It smells so good. Little Peanut stood on tiptoe and looked into the distance. Someone who had gone to join in on the fun and came back replied, it was Teacher Zhai Yin, who led the team. Wang Ling, Zhai Yin. That Zhai Yin who had used a dragon pork chop to almost kill one of the 10 founding generals. Wang Ling was stunned. Unexpectedly, he noticed from afar that there were actually already people drinking the soup. Furthermore, everyone's faces were brimming with happiness, as if nothing had happened to them at all. Wang Ling cupped his chin and pondered for a while. Could it be that Zhai Yin's cooking skills had improved recently? After drinking the soup, the student sighed with emotion. Wow! I've tasted several bowls of soup, but this one is the best. And it's actually salty and flavorful. Most of the soup made by the other teams is sweet. And there's also the fruit soup. Someone complained. Because all the ingredients had been locally sourced this time, they weren't allowed to add any of their own seasonings, which directly led to a lot of people making sweet soup. Now that Zhai Yin had made a pot of salted vegetable soup, it was immediately praised by the students and teachers alike. Whoever marries Teacher Zhai Yin will be too happy. One of the teachers from the other teams praised, speaking of which, what did Teacher Zhai add to the soup? Why does it smell so good? Embarrassed by the praise, Zhai Yin said a little bashfully, nothing, I just added a grain of soil. Everyone, Zhai Yin, I heard from a student just now that the soil was pretty salty, so I thought I'd add a grain of it. I never thought it would be so effective. Chapter 734. On one side, it was a lively picnic before the storm, while on the other side, the battle in the fake remains was still ongoing. In any case, after the old devil and Qingyu, the master of Immortal Mansion, talked, they realized that Evil Sword God was actually the one who had been slapped the most out of the three of them, and there was a deep sense of disappointment on their faces. In terms of overall combat strength, the three of them had the strength of a true immortal at their peak. Qingyu himself was only half a step away from true immortal, but he had relied on the power of his familiar to successfully cultivate an intrinsic spirit field in advance, and with the advantage of the intrinsic spirit field, he had also been able to display true immortal cultivation. But the two of them never expected that Brother Echo, the eyeshadow in the air, would be the one who had been slapped the most out of the three of them. Hands behind his back, the old devil took a deep breath. He and Qingyu's eyes met. They didn't speak telepathically, but in that moment, they had a tacit understanding to vent their anger. When they got back this time, they had to teach this eyeshadow freak a good lesson. In any case, it was a daily occurrence for Evil Sword God to be beaten in Songhai First Prison Special Prison Cell. That was because this guy had coarse skin and thick flesh, and he cultivated a technique that allowed him to rapidly heal his wounds, so he also had a self-healing constitution. It was just that this kind of self-healing constitution wasn't as frightening as the rumors said about President Bai. Inside the inescapable net barrier that General Bai had set up, everything was broken down into particles invisible to the naked eye, as if not even a speck of dust was left behind. There was a huge pit in the ground, and standing at the mouth of the pit, it was like looking down into an abyss. However, this explosion didn't directly blow up the underground barrier set up by Night Chief's group. The other party was very cunning, and had hidden very deep to set up the barrier. But while the other party hadn't been completely blown up, at the very least, the most troublesome 7 deformed platelets had been completely wiped out. The Huaxiao Alliance members lowered their eyes as they lit candles for the 7 deformed platelets: cerebral thrombosis, myocardial infarction, fatty liver, brainless and unhappy, and big head son and small head father. This incident also served as a wake-up call for this group of cultivators. Even though he was a cultivator, he still had to take care of his body. Moreover, he couldn't neglect the importance of taking care of his body just because he was a cultivator. Apart from practicing techniques, a real cultivator also had to take care of his body and mind. It was common knowledge that the lifespan of cultivators was longer than that of ordinary people. The so-called golden core stage of 800 years and the soul formation stage of 1000 years were only the normal lifespan that could be achieved in theory. If one did not take care of his body, even the most talented cultivator would easily lose his lifespan. This wasn't like what was written in novels. In fact, in real life, there were plenty of cultivators who died less than 10 years after reaching the soul formation stage, and most of them had their days and nights turned upside down, thinking that they had a long lifespan after reaching the soul formation stage, so they didn't have to worry about anything. We have to take good care of our bodies in the future. Even if it's for the sake of the platelets in our bodies, we have to cultivate more diligently and cultivate our moral character. This is the result of overindulging in lust. Someone sighed. There were many kinds of desires here, such as food, sex, wealth, and so on. At that moment, someone couldn't help asking suspiciously, "Do you think there are immortal cultivators in this world who sleep well all day, study in peace, and keep a low profile?" Hearing this, the old devil, evil sword god and Qing Yu couldn't help trembling. They all thought of one person. Wang Ling. The old devil and evil sword god touched their cheeks thoughtfully. This was where Wang Ling had hit them before. Qing Yu raised his hand, then put it down. Qing Yu had nowhere to touch. In the sky, after firing the cannon, General Bai's expression hadn't relaxed at all. He stared at the huge, round abyss in the ground. "Pay attention, it's not over yet." He had a strong premonition that something more terrifying than the 7 platelets from before was about to surge out of the ground. Sure enough, as soon as General Bai said this, there was an immediate rumble from below. Pointing at the abyss, the light of evil sword god's purple investigative demon eyes directly enveloped the ground, and the scene below was visualized in the sky, allowing him to clearly understand the situation in the abyss. At the bottom of the abyss, many snow-white guys appeared. They wore peaked caps and held short white daggers in both hands. Each of them had a murderous glint in their eyes. Although they weren't as big as the 7 deformed platelets, it was clear that this group of people in white had immense lethality and destructive power. The most important thing was that there were so many of them. In the blink of an eye, there were already tens of thousands of people in white, and more were emerging from the ground like bamboo shoots after the rain. Old Devil Yun couldn't help sighing and narrowing his eyes at such a vast momentum. Back when he had broken into the Huaxia National Palace, there had only been 10,000 people, by Ju. Qing Yu was blank. Aren't they formed from white blood cells? The old devil was alarmed. So what was Bai Ju? Had this unscrupulous author taken it out again and added random words? Everyone, prepare to fight back. General Bai gave the order in the air. These guys were too swift and powerful. Many of them had already scuttled up to try to tear open the inescapable net. He had already fired one shot just now, and he had to wait for the gloves on his hands to cool down completely before he could fire another, otherwise it would be a huge burden on his body. On the other side, the command center was also alarmed by Night Chief's momentum. Not only did they summon platelets, they also summoned a white blood cell army. President Chi frowned as he stared at the image on the screen. In his view, this was pure self-harm. Using the cells at work spell to activate cells for summoning had a huge side effect of shortening one's lifespan. Generally speaking, if you wanted to reduce the loss of your lifespan, it was best to only summon one type of cell. But the other party had not only summoned platelets, but also a white blood cell army, which would double the loss of lifespan. What are they up to? General Yi felt that something wasn't right with this development. One reason is to escape, and the other is to disrupt the situation. President Chi answered quickly. Also, Old E, I even think that their purpose this time isn't just to realize their own ambitions. What do you mean? General E asked. Rumor has it that Beast King's remains has an advanced level 13 secret technique, which can be used to command the world. But we've been on guard this time, and we've put on such a show of force to wipe out foreign rebels. I'm afraid that their real goal has already changed. These people in the fake remains are purely here to disrupt the situation and distract us. At that moment, President Chi suddenly felt very uneasy. But what would their new target be? Was it still number 60 high? President Chi thought. That shouldn't be the case. Chapter 735. In the command center of the Huaxiao Alliance building, President Chi carefully flipped through the official list of Dark Network members. Most of the troublesome people among them had been sent to the fake remains by Night Chief by a freak combination of factors, such as Bloody Butterfly and Lord Dark Fragrance. But President Chi still had a very strong sense of unease, as if an axe had suddenly been hung high in his heart, and the rope connecting it to the axe was already on the verge of snapping. The last time he had felt this strong sense of unease was 6 years ago, before the sudden descent of the gate between worlds. In fact, it wasn't just President Chi, General Yi also had this feeling. This was an ability to foresee danger, which was more or less acquired after reaching the true immortal realm. It was also the rumored sixth sense. Generally speaking, the more advanced a cultivator's realm was, the more accurate their sixth sense would be. Wang Ling's twitching eyelid warning was also a kind of sixth sense. But the twitching eyelid warning was more accurate than a normal sixth sense. If you had to find a flaw, it was that all the dangers foretold by the twitching eyelid warning concerned Wang Ling himself, and he couldn't foresee other people's situations. Wang Ling had sensed grenade-throwing senior immortals' danger before, and that had been through a foretelling dream. Wang Ling rarely had foretelling dreams, and when he did, it would definitely come true. But because he had to prepare for the summer camp and the final exams, he had actually been suffering from insomnia recently. It wasn't that he didn't want to sleep, but that compared with sleeping, studying was more important. As long as you didn't die from studying, you would learn to your death. If you didn't work hard when you were young, you would only be sad when you were old. This was what Father Wang had taught Wang Ling since he was young. Although the two gremlins pen and eraser could do his homework for him, the prerequisite was that he had to have a good grasp of all the knowledge in order to do so. The head of state is here this time. Given his strength, it's definitely more than enough to protect the students. Gazing at the screen, General Li pinched his mustache as he spoke slowly. Let's hope so. President Chi sighed. While that was true, in the end, 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. The main reason was that they didn't know what on earth the other side was going to do next. But judging from the enemy's movements, President Chi was sure that Night Chief's target this time wasn't just that level 13 magic treasure. Command Center, pass down the order. Tell all the teachers in the real remains to be on guard and prepare to capture the culprit. President Chi gave the latest instructions to the staff. President Chi had initially wanted to see what this group of people were up to before taking action, but now that he considered that the accompanying students might be in danger, he immediately issued the order to arrest them. President Dylan thought that he could sneak into the team without anyone noticing, but before he could do so, Huaxiao Alliance had already obtained information on Night Chief's foreign forces and Dark Network rebels. After Huaxiao Alliance sent out the order, Wu Xinjuan on the other side received the news right away. The group of Night Chief members and Dark Network members who had been discovered earlier had been separated from the medical team, and even the military tents for the picnic had been specially prepared by Wu Xinjuan. In order not to arouse suspicion, Wu Xinjuan had specially divided the medical team into 2 military tents and had the regular medical personnel act as barbed wolves inside. If this group of people who were to be arrested were all in one tent, it would instead raise suspicions. Thus, the moment he received President Chi's order, Wu Xinjuan immediately sent a message in a branch group called Expert Fishermen. Attention, everyone, get ready to pull in the net. The expert fishermen were all teachers who would be participating in the operation to pull in the net this time, and had been carefully selected by Wu Xinjuan. Zhai Yin and Wang Ming were both among them. So soon? Wang Ming replied swiftly. Wu Xinjuan nodded. The higher-ups think that this group of people may be on the verge of taking action, and may pose a threat to the students' safety, so we have to strike first. Everyone should have already seen the information on this group of people mixed in. When you pull in the net, please remember not to accidentally injure your allies. All right. Wang Ming nodded. Can Head of State 001 start up normally? Wu Xinjuan asked again. I was just debugging it, but it won't affect its operation, Wang Ming replied. He had just been debugging Head of State 001. Although he still didn't understand which program had caused its intelligence to evolve, since the task had already been assigned, he could only wait for Head of State 001 to complete its task before continuing to study it. From beginning to end, he still couldn't figure out why this Head of State 001 had comprehended the super transformation form skill on its own. Wu Xinjuan, everyone, get ready first. Wait for my signal in 30 seconds. Everyone, keep an eye on the military tents of the two medical teams and move together. All right. What's the signal? SKR. On the other side, President Dylan's infiltration plan had already begun. Because of the change in the master plan, Huaxiao Nation had sent too many people to deal with them this time, and their main target this time was Wang Ming. As long as they could capture Wang Ming first and use him as a hostage, they believed that the master plan could still be carried out smoothly in the end. Just a few minutes ago, they had received the latest news on this Wang Ming from Night Chief. This was information on Wang Ming, but there wasn't much in it. It was a resume from Wang Ming's university days, and he still used the alias Wang Shaoer. The only thing they knew at the moment was that the name Wang Shaoer was fake, and this young man's real name was Ming. As the teacher who was qualified to lead the team into Beast Kings remains this time, it was very clear that this wasn't a scientific matter based on what was written in this information. The more he tries to hide it, the more it proves that his identity isn't simple. President Dylan had already come to this conclusion when he had seen this information. He dared to conclude that this teacher Wang Ming absolutely wasn't an ordinary person. Similarly, President Dylan also had his own branch group. The secret code they had discussed before was a funny emoji. As long as President Dylan sent the funny emoji, everyone would immediately take action. Not long after the emoji was sent, several powerful spotlights instantly shone on the outside of President Dylan's military tent. This was followed by two sharp SKR signals, which were very unpretentious. Dozens of silhouettes instantly surrounded their military tents, not even a drop of water could trickle through. Outside the military tent, Wu Xinjuan said, SKR. Criminals inside, listen up, you've been surrounded. Please give up your futile struggle and resistance. Otherwise, I'll play Wu Yifun's dry voice. Chapter 736. Wu Xinjuan was making a lot of noise. Because they were closing in, many of the lead teachers had surrounded the two military tents. A lot of onlookers who didn't know what was going on crowded around them. What's going on? Is this an impromptu performance by the teachers? Someone asked. They had no idea that a bunch of people representing the foreign rebel group Night Chief had infiltrated their ranks. By the time most of the students came back to their senses, the situation was already effectively under control. Everyone, don't join in the fun, do what you have to do. This has nothing to do with you. Several of the lead teachers had taken the initiative to maintain order at the front, because more and more students were coming over to watch, and there was the possibility of unexpected danger. Dopey Gua and Super Chin drank the salted vegetable soup that Jai Yin had served them contentedly as they watched the situation from a distance. Super Chin elbowed Dopey Gua. "What's going on? Does your uncle have any information?" Dopey Gua frowned and replied, "Maybe it has something to do with foreign forces." "Foreign forces?" Super Chin was puzzled. Dopey Gua nodded. "Every year, some foreign forces sneak into the remains. I heard my uncle say before that the country is going to crack down hard on them. But I didn't expect them to be so heavy-handed. It can be said that using musical weapons is quite insane." Next to him, Little Peanut pursed his lips and said doubtfully, "Is it really that bad?" "Dopey Gua, do you know why there are always some incidents in the music talent shows every year? Those people who look stupid and think they're good at singing go up to show off their voices, but in the end, their singing almost makes the judges flip their tables." Super Chin, "Why?" Dopey Gua sighed. "It's because they gained confidence from the musical weapons." Super Chin, Little Peanut, Wang Ling, speaking up to this point, Dopey Gua was suddenly a little curious again. "Do you think there's anyone in our class who can sing well? I remember that we have a good singing class activity at the start of next semester. Someone has to lead the singing." At that moment, everyone turned to look at Wang Ling. Because Wang Ling had sung in class with a guitar before, and he had done a pretty good job. "Wang Ling," Super Chin patted Wang Ling on the shoulder. "Wang Ling, it's up to you. Anyway, you usually don't speak, so it's good to have a few more lines." Dopey Gua, "This subject agrees." Little Peanut, "This subject agrees." Wang Ling, President Dylan hadn't expected that they would be targeted from the start, and that the other party would treat them in such an inhumane manner. Although they had long heard that the song Wu Yifan hummed when Daoist Wu was bathing was a great weapon, they hadn't expected this Wu Zhenjuan, as Daoist Wu's disciple, to be so savage that he had even preserved his Shifu's dry voice when he was bathing. In an instant, President Dylan's expression changed drastically. If you dare to sing, we'll all die together." The music master, irascible Dharmaraja Daoist Wu, was extremely lethal. No one wanted to test him, not even President Dylan. This was a great killing weapon. As long as the recording was combined with a sound-amplifying magic treasure, it could be used. Wu Zhenjuan was already prepared for President Dylan's words, and he gave the signal again. "SKR! SKR! SKR!" As soon as he said this, President Dylan saw the rest of the medical staff in the tent take out earplugs that they had prepared beforehand and put them in their ears. President Dylan, MMP. It turned out that it had all been prepared in advance. At that moment, the soundproofing barrier outside the military tent had already been set up. Next, as long as the dry voice was played, the rest of the people wouldn't be affected. Knock out a bunch of people first. With a smile on his face, Wu Zhenjuan directly threw a magic ball with sound and shadow into the military tent. The moment the magic ball hit the ground, it shattered like glass, and the voice of the legendary melody Daoist Wu Yifan finally rang out from within. It was just a recording of Wu Yifan's bath, but the moment the glass ball hit the ground, it actually turned into a powerful force that could shake the air. Visible sound waves spread out on the spot like pulsing energy waves. For a moment, the Night Chief cultivators covered their ears and rolled on the ground in pain. A few minutes later, the Night Chief members who had been disguised as medical staff were all tied up and carried out. Huaxiao Alliance had specially prepared the immortal binding rope for them this time. The more they struggled, the tighter they got, and it also suppressed their spirit energy. Done. Wu Zhenjuan clapped his hands. Wu Zhenjuan's heart was at ease now that this matter had come to an end. At the very least, he didn't have to worry about the student's safety anymore. His face was dark, and it was impossible to tell whether he was angry or not. He stared coldly at President Dylan. "You'll be detained for the time being. I suggest you tell us the truth. We've already applied to the international prison for your detention, and we should get a reply very soon. More than 10 years ago, Huaxiao Nation had specially applied to establish an international prison to deal with criminals who infiltrated from abroad. There were 3 international prisons in the world, and one of them was located in Huaxiao's capital, Jinghua City. In fact, the international prison had been established more than 10 years ago for the sake of today's plan. President Dylan grit his teeth and was very unwilling to give up. He had underestimated Huaxiao Alliance's determination to strike down this time. Ever since he had found out about the fake remains, President Dylan had felt that he should have been more cautious. Although they had infiltrated the remains this time, the other party had been watching them the whole time. This had been a huge strategic mistake. As Night Chief's commander this time, President Dylan naturally couldn't escape the blame. But right now, they still had a chance to struggle, and hadn't lost everything. Because just now, President Dylan had observed that there was one person who hadn't been caught, and that person was none other than that teenage killer, Ghosthead Blade, who had recently been in the limelight among Dark Network members, and was known as Numinous Mother's third disciple. President Dylan narrowed his eyes as he continued to ponder. Sure enough, hiring Ghosthead Blade at a high price back then had been the right decision, even though she was 10 times more expensive than the other Dark Network members. But sure enough, there was a reason for it. At least for now, Ghosthead Blade had become the last hope of the entire Night Chief village. But then again, the moment that Soundwave magic ball had been thrown, Ghosthead Blade had still been by his side. But how on earth had she escaped? President Dylan was stunned by Ghosthead Blade's swift and violent reaction. Chapter 737. This knife was extremely fast, and like a shadow, it instantly aimed at Wang Ming's thigh. It was very obvious that this was a planned attack. It wasn't meant to take Wang Ming's life, but purely to incapacitate him and then abduct him. At that moment, Wang Ming was waiting for Wu Xinjuan's signal. He had thought that all the members of Night Chief as well as the Dark Network forces they had hired had been captured, but he never thought that one of them would slip through the net and come for him. This Ghosthead Blade had come and gone like a ghost. She had come prepared. But the head of state's reaction was equally fast. The moment the knife light broke open the military tent, the invisible head of state directly attacked without even revealing his killer move. Paw! He had actually caught a white knife with his bare hand, and directly smashed the flying knife to pieces. Looking for me. It was only at that moment that Wang Ming realized that he had been ambushed, and the expression on his face was very different. This person had actually been able to evade Wu Xinjuan's Soundwave magic ball attack. Not only had he escaped unscathed from irascible Dharmaraja Wu Yifun's shrieks, he had also launched a precise surprise attack on Wang Ming. It seemed that this person wasn't an ordinary person. Wang Ming immediately issued an order to the head of state disguised as Number 001. Number 001. Capture him alive. It was only after Wang Ming gave the order that Ghosthead Blade, whose ambush had failed, was astonished to realize that there was actually an expert hidden in the military tent. Ghosthead Blade knew that she had been careless, but she was also well aware that this hidden expert was very powerful. Before she had launched the sneak attack, she had clearly scouted out the situation inside the military tent. The problem was that she had only sensed Wang Ming. A lead teacher actually had a personal bodyguard by his side. In a split second, Ghosthead Blade, who had initially been uninterested in Wang Ming, became very interested. Outside the military tent, Ghosthead Blade was hiding in a lush tree 100 meters away from Wang Ming's tent. She was holding a small Gothic umbrella with lace edges. After realizing that there was another expert in the military tent, she immediately pulled out the handle of the umbrella, cut her wrist, and smeared the blood on her left eyelid. Azura eye. When he opened his eyes again, Ghosthead Blade's left eye had changed. His left eye instantly turned red, and under the influence of the blood essence, there was a spirit array engraved inside. Azura Eyes, this was the legendary ability that Ghosthead Blade relied on to become famous. It wasn't some strange eye technique. Instead, he had dug out the eye of a magical beast and transplanted it into his left eye to refine it. After the refinement was successful, the transplanted magical beast eyes would fuse with the human body. It would look normal under normal conditions, but once it was affected by the blood essence, it would immediately transform. Facing the mysterious and invisible expert in the tent, Ghosthead Blade felt that it was necessary to use this method based on his battle experience. But something unexpected happened. Ghosthead Blade discovered that even if he activated the eye of the Shura, he could only see an extremely blurry silhouette. He couldn't even see the person's face clearly. He could only vaguely sense a silhouette and a gaze, and the most terrifying thing was that the other party's gaze directly collided with hers, completely undisguised as he stared straight at her. This was the standard look of a hawk looking at a wolf. Ghosthead Blade broke out in a cold sweat. Who was this person? Ghosthead Blade was so frightened that all the pores on his body suddenly shrank. It was just a glance, but Ghosthead Blade was already scared out of his wits. But in the next moment, the figure suddenly moved. He launched a counterattack at a speed that Ghosthead Blade couldn't follow with the naked eye. A tremendous pressure instantly surged into Ghosthead Blade's soul. She felt as if a weight of 1,000 kilograms was hanging over her body, and she couldn't move even half a step from the tree trunk. When Ghosthead Blade came back to her senses, a large, thick, and strong hand was already pressing down on her shoulder. A true immortal expert, Ghosthead Blade instantly despaired. Although she didn't know exactly what true immortal level the other party was at, the fact that the enemy was actually a true immortal was truly beyond Ghosthead Blade's expectations. Who on earth was that Wang Ming? He actually had a true immortal expert protecting him at all times. Was this person the illegitimate son of Huaxiu's head of state? Ghosthead Blade broke out in a cold sweat. Now that she knew that the other party was a true immortal expert, Ghosthead Blade believed that she already had no strength left to resist, but running away had always been her usual tactic. So after recognizing the reality, Ghosthead Blade's first reaction was to break free from the head of state's control. Her shoulder was pressed down, and the aura of a true immortal was exerting on it, causing it to become heavier and heavier. Ghosthead Blade couldn't breathe under the pressure. This was a girl, but she was far more vicious than the head of state had imagined. This arm, I'll give it to you. Ghosthead Blade grit her teeth and pulled hard. Her entire right arm and right shoulder were torn off like beef jerky. Then, dragging her broken body, she swiftly fled, turning into a stream of light that scuttled into the distance. Holding Ghosthead Blade's broken arm, the head of state's eyebrows twitched. Although she was a woman, he hadn't expected her to be such a savage character. The head of state knew of the gecko art. This spell could simulate a gecko abandoning a part of its body to escape when needed, and the abandoned part would later regrow. This was a life-saving method. Many cultivators had learned this technique, but not many could use it proficiently. But the point was, this Ghosthead Blade wasn't using some gecko art. The other party had directly abandoned her arm and forcibly broken free. She's a ruthless person. The head of state threw away the broken arm in his hand and sighed softly. The next moment, he stretched out his hand and directly grabbed in the direction in which Ghosthead Blade had fled. Buddha's palm seal. A moment later, the head of state caught a flying stream of light, and Ghosthead Blade, who had been forcibly shrunk by a spell, appeared in his palm with a frightened expression on her face. Ghosthead Blade knew that she had run into a tough opponent today. This was a grade 7 advanced spell, and was the spell that the head of state was most familiar with and commonly used at this stage. As for the reason why the head of state had learned this spell, it had started when he had first encountered Father Wang's novels. When Father Wang had just started writing novels, the head of state had developed the idea of learning this spell because the updates had been very slow. Back then, the head of state had wanted to firmly grasp Father Wang in the palm of his hand and update his novels. Thus, Father Wang had played a very important role in motivating the head of state to learn this spell. Staring at Ghost Head Blade in his palm, the head of state considered whether he should show off other skills. For example, the small black room of heaven and earth, the wheel of sun and moon like shuttles. When the head of state thought about it carefully, he had really learned quite a few skills back when he had been waiting for Father Wang to update his novels and when he had urged him to do so. Chapter 738. It was very obvious that this was an almighty. Holding Ghost Head Blade in her hand in her shrunken form, she instantly felt a sense of despair. Was it all over? Then, she raised her head and finally saw the Almighty's face clearly. In the end, she was scared out of her wits. How could it be him? That young man wasn't even a cultivator, but he was actually this important to Washoe Nation. The head of state had personally come forward to protect him. This was simply unheard of. Ghost Head Blade knelt in the palm of the head of state's hand. She had been completely suppressed by that great divine power just now and couldn't move. "Who is this?" the head of state asked the command center with narrowed eyes. Very quickly, the head of state's internal headset replied, "Your Excellency, after investigation, this is a dark network Red SS wanted member called Ghost Head Blade." Ghost Head Blade. The head of state rubbed his chin. It seemed that he had heard this name before. This person is currently the most dangerous of all the dark network members on the run. After that old devil was arrested, this person's reputation in the dark network has skyrocketed. It was a little unexpected that Night Chief was able to hire her this time, President Chi said with a sigh. Now that Ghost Head Blade was under control, President Chi instantly felt a lot more at ease. The uncertainty he had been worried about all this time was this Ghost Head Blade. This was a dark network member they had overlooked. Before entering the real remains, all foreign forces and dark network members had been locked down. It was a mistake on the command center's part that Ghost Head Blade hadn't been counted, and it had almost led to a disaster. "Your Excellency, this Ghost Head Blade was my mistake." President Chi bowed his head and apologized. "It's fine. In any case, Little Ming is safe enough with me by his side. Everything is going according to plan." Gripping Ghost Head Blade in one hand, the head of state gave a thumbs up with the other. But President Chi wasn't relieved by these words. This was his mistake, and punishment was necessary, otherwise he wouldn't be able to convince the public. President Chi decided that after this summer camp was over, he would submit an application to have his salary deducted for 500 years deducted. "President Chi, Your Excellency Head of State, Ghost Head Blade is a wanted criminal who has committed numerous heinous crimes and is in contact with many dark forces. We have to watch her carefully. We also want to get some clues about the dark forces from Ghost Head Blade." Princeps quickly nodded. "Don't worry about that. I know what I'm doing. But you probably didn't expect that the legendary treacherous Ghost Head Blade is actually a girl." "A girl?" President Chi was blank. Part of the reason why Ghost Head Blade was so difficult to capture was because of his appearance. Many people's impression of Ghost Head Blade was that he was a tall and skinny man who was as thin as firewood and extremely gloomy. This image originated from the profiling of Ghost Head Blade after many psychologists analyzed his crimes. Back then, these profilers' descriptions of Ghost Head Blade were surprisingly consistent. But now, after capturing the real person, Ghost Head Blade's image was completely changed. President Chi had a feeling that if Ghost Head Blade's arrest was exposed by the media, it would definitely be sensational news. President Chi frowned and replied to the head of state through the command platform, "Your Excellency Head of State, you can't be soft-hearted just because the other party is a woman. This person is ruthless and crafty. Don't worry, I have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex." Princeps said. A few minutes later, the head of state suddenly cried out in alarm from the command center. "Ah!" President Chi, Your Excellency Head of State, what's wrong? Princeps, when I was talking to you just now, I forgot that I was holding Ghost Head Blade. I used a little force. President Chi took a deep breath. Is she still alive? Princeps, already turned into paste. President Chi, after that, disguised as Head of State 001, the Head of State returned to Wang Ming's side with Ghost Head Blade's paste. Shockingly, it was another living pile of human scum, Wang Ming. For some reason, Wang Ming felt that this scene was familiar. Among the first batch of Shadow Stream killers who had broken into number 60 high school, it seemed that Wang Ling had turned one of them into human scum. Sure enough, when Almighties took action, did they all have a special obsession with paste? Wang Ming stared at the paste on the ground and sighed deeply. Wait a minute, but all of a sudden, he seemed to think of something. Speaking of Almighties taking action, Wang Ming thought of something that sounded very nonsensical at first, but was in fact very likely to happen. If Wang Ming had designed Head of State 001, he shouldn't have been so heavy-handed. Head of State 001's power system was jointly operated by the Heavenly E satellite. He had given the order to capture Ghost Head Blade alive just now, so the system would definitely control the power output. Even if Ghost Head Blade was crippled, it wouldn't go so far as to crush him into paste. So to sum up, there was only one truth that Wang Ming could think of at that moment, recalling the various abnormal reactions of Head of State 001 earlier. Wang Ming instantly broke out in a cold sweat. This Head of State, it couldn't be the real Head of State, right? If that was the case, then this Head of State should have been switched before entering the remains. At this speculation, Wang Ming took a deep breath. No, even if this was the real Head of State, he absolutely couldn't see through it. This was a big leader. If he exposed a leader in public, what peaceful days would he be able to live if things got ugly for him in the future? On the other side, the Head of State also felt a little uncomfortable under Wang Ming's stare. He steadied his expression as much as possible, tensing every muscle in his face. It was actually the Head of State himself who had come up with this plan to swap the raccoon for the Crown Prince, and he was very confident in his disguise. Now, the real Head of State 001 should have already disguised himself as President Han Di, who had escaped from the vaccine company, and infiltrated Night Chief. The Head of State thought that his disguise was flawless, but at that moment, he felt that Wang Ming in front of him seemed to have already sensed something. Naturally, the Head of State was gratified at first. The person standing in front of him now was Wisdom Saint's disciple, the nation's most powerful brain. Furthermore, he was the only existence today who could possibly surpass President Chi in terms of intelligence. Wang Ming's intelligence kept increasing every year. It was only natural that the most powerful brain like this would find some flaws in him. The Head of State comforted himself in his heart. Looking at Wang Ming's doubtful expression, the Head of State did his best to remain calm. No, even if he had really been discovered, he had to continue pretending. He was the Head of State. If he was exposed in public, how humiliating would that be? Chapter 739. It was still July 31st on Monday in the 15th week of the semester. It had originally been an evening picnic. The plan for the Foreign Force Night Chief and its spontaneously hired Dark Network members to infiltrate the real remains had ultimately ended with all of them arrested and one person turned into paste. But Wang Ling had an ominous feeling that things weren't that simple. That night, Wang Ming received a new task from the command center, which was to collect a DNA sample from Ghost Head Blade, who had turned into paste, for a data comparison to confirm his true identity. It would have been very easy to compare the data with Head of State 001. He just needed to take a bit of paste and stuff it into Head of State 001's mouth, and it would automatically identify it based on the built-in database in its body. But the current situation was that this Head of State 001 was the real Head of State, even if Wang Ming had 1,000 guts, there was no way he could stuff paste into the real head of state's mouth. So in the end, he still had to do it himself. He had sent the head of state away and had him enter patrol alert mode. Furthermore, Wang Ming had no intention of summoning him back until the end of this summer camp in the remains. When was work the most stressful? Of course it was when the boss was around. Huaxiao Nation's Research Institute was an official organization, so who was its boss? Old Qi? Of course not. Come to think of it, Old Qi himself was also a part-time worker. The head of state was the final big boss. But Wang Ming really never expected the head of state to take number 001's place in this summer camp. The head of state had disguised himself very well, but he had also revealed some flaws. If Wang Ming hadn't noticed these flaws, it was very likely that he would still be in the dark now. So the question now was, where on earth had head of state 001, which he had invented, run off to carry out its mission? But Wang Ming reckoned that Old Qi was the only one who could answer all of this. Even if Old Qi wasn't the mastermind, he definitely had the right to be able to trick Wang Ming and almost screw him over so miserably. Wang Ming had almost become the laughingstock of the entire research institute. Wang Ming stared at the paste in front of him and wiped at his sweat as he pondered. The more he thought about it, the more afraid he felt. Fortunately, he had been quick-witted. Then, Wang Ming took out a small silver-gray magic ball and activated it with the spirit energy stored in the ring. The magic ball spun in the air like a top, and then it swiftly split into 8 mechanical arms like a crab. This was an all-purpose experimental assistance robot invented by Wang Ming, codenamed Crab. Prepare to take samples. Wang Ming gave the order, and the crab immediately stretched out its mechanical arm to scan the whole blob. As a result, the crab's spherical body immediately turned red after scanning the paste. It was a warning color, indicating that there might be foreign objects in the sample. Then, Wang Ming saw one of the crab's mechanical arms instantly transform into a pair of forceps, which then pulled out a pitch-black blade from the paste. This is... Wang Ming was almost instantly on high alert. He had a feeling that this blade was dangerous. However, in the next breath, the blade actually turned into a stream of light and flashed in front of his eyes. When he came back to his senses, there was already a knife mark on his cheek, on guard. Wang Ming broke out in a cold sweat. He knew things wouldn't be so simple. As an assistance, the crab naturally had the ability to defend itself to a certain extent. After Wang Ming gave the order, the crab immediately stretched out its mechanical arms to try and control the blade. The mechanical arms stretched out extremely quickly, but the small blade was even faster. The crab's back swing was too long. With 2 metallic clangs, the crab's 2 mechanical arms were instantly cut off. Wang Ming grit his teeth. It now looked like things were starting to get dangerous and troublesome. Perhaps this pitch-black blade had been left behind by Ghost Head Blade. It was like a venomous snake. Even after it was beheaded, its head would still retain a powerful venom, and one could be bitten if they were the slightest bit careless. But the next scene made Wang Ming feel that his thinking had been a little too simple, because this blade actually spoke. That lord is finally no longer by your side. The pitch-black blade opened its mouth. It wasn't Ghost Head Blade's voice, but it had the same tone as Ghost Head Blade's. Wang Ming narrowed his eyes and broke out in a cold sweat. You are. I am Ghost Head Blade. The small pitch-black blade continued to speak. No one knows that this is my true body. I once sold my soul to the artifact spirit of an ancient blade and became a fragment like this. As for the body you see, it's just my host. Unfortunately, that cute little loli has the highest compatibility rate among all the hosts I've found. In the end, that lord slapped her into a paste. Wang Ming, speaking up to this point, the small blade gave a cold smile. Hee hee. But that's fine. In any case, that little loli doesn't have much time left before her expiration date. the key is to find the next body. Wang Ming was startled. This actually had an expiration date. I thought that the kid you shared a room with before was pretty good. Then go look for him. Why are you looking for me? This time, it was Ghost Head Blade's turn to be startled. Wasn't that person his student? How could a teacher be so shameless? No wonder Huaxiao Alliance had been unable to determine Ghost Head Blade's true identity. As long as the other party kept changing hosts, there was nothing Huaxiao Alliance could do. In some sense, Ghost Head Blade's method was even more troublesome than that Myriad Faces old man, who was an expert in disguise among the Dark Network members. That was to say, even if Wang Ming could detect the DNA in that paste, he still wouldn't be able to pinpoint Ghost Head Blade's true identity. Ghost Head Blade, alright, now that you know everything about me, if you don't want me to kill you, you have two choices. Wang Ming suddenly wrapped his arms around his chest. What do you want to do to me? Ghost Head Blade composed himself and said to Wang Ming, first, use your skills to unlock Night Chief and all the Dark Network members. Second, you become my new host. I'm so weak, you want me to? That's not very good. Wang Ming's eyes widened in astonishment. The host's ability isn't the key. As long as you sign a host contract with me, even if the host is just an ordinary person, you can obtain cultivation abilities. The only drawback is that if an ordinary person becomes the host, the body's shelf life will be greatly reduced. All the more reason I don't recommend you choose me as your host. At that moment, Wang Ming suddenly looked at Ghost Head Blade seriously. Ghost Head Blade. Wang Ming spread his hands. I'm afraid your IQ won't keep up. Ghost Head Blade. Chapter 740. At this time, all the classes were writing their summer camp diaries in their tents. This was a task assigned to them by the teachers leading each team. All the students participating in this summer camp had to write down their reflections on the road in a diary of at least 1,000 words. This was the same as the military training diary from the 6 schools' joint military training exercise, but it was different from an ordinary military training diary. Because this summer camp diary counted for points. The key to getting high marks was to write down some of the reflections on the spirit plants they had seen on the road, including some theories on how they could be used after understanding their pharmacological effects. To put it bluntly, it was a competition to see who had the biggest brain holes. The summer camp diary's overall score accounted for 50% of the total score for the entire summer camp activity. Hence, everyone had to pay attention to it. Dopey, what are you writing? Can you let me have a look after you're done? Super Chin had always been weak in liberal arts. Inside the military tent, he bit a pen in his mouth and held the diary in his hand, feeling like he didn't know where to start. Writing was the most difficult thing. Furthermore, it had to be 1,000 words. It was one thing to hold it back in high school, but Super Chin reckoned that if he entered university and entered a major that had nothing to do with liberal arts, he might not even be able to squeeze out 500 words. I'm also thinking about a theme. It's a little complicated. So I'm going to start with a political perspective for the first day's diary. Dopey Guo was the political class representative, and was good at criticizing the current situation. The most important thing was that he had a lot of gossip on hand, so he didn't have to worry about not having something to write about. It was just that whether what he wrote was up to standard and whether it was of good quality was another matter. But writing a summer camp diary in the form of a political class essay had to be done carefully. Otherwise, he would have to take responsibility if there were any deviations in the report in the future. If you don't have a theme, you can ask Lotus Sunday. Her tent is very lively, and a lot of people go there to ask for advice. Little Peanut was halfway through writing when he heard that the two of them still hadn't decided on a theme, so he hurriedly said this. Super Chin, Lotus Sun. Dopey Gua, it's very normal for Lotus Sun to know. Every year, there are experts sent by Huaguo Water Curtain Group in the scientific research team. These experts were originally from the Research Institute, and were then hired by Huaguo Water Curtain Group at sky-high salaries. Our country's only 5th-grade spirit medicine laboratory was jointly built by Lotus Sun's family and the Research Institute. Huaguo Water Curtain Group invests a lot of money every year in the cultivation of spirit plants and the refinement of pills. Super Chin sked. According to Dopigua's explanation, Lotus Sun clearly had plenty of opportunities to secretly take supplementary lessons. Furthermore, it was likely that she would major in pharmacology when she entered university. As the eldest daughter of Huaguo Water Curtain Group, she had a very heavy burden on her shoulders. Speaking up to this point, Dopigua pulled open the curtain to take a look. Sure enough, there were students from various schools crowding outside her tent. Lotus Sun's good looks had always made her very popular. Some of them had come to ask questions, while others had naturally come to harass her. Super Chin pursed his lips. I'm afraid these people are wasting their time on Lotus Sun. I keep thinking that student Lotus Sun already has someone she likes. After saying this, Super Chin looked at Wang Ling for some reason, which made Wang Ling's hand tremble and he break his pen. Little Peanut, Lotus Sun has someone she likes. It should be. Super Chin actually wasn't too sure. And I think this person is in our class. Wang Ling, while the two of them were talking, Dopigua came back from outside the tent with a shocked expression on his face. Little Peanut, what's wrong? Dopigua, Lotus Sun will definitely get full marks for her diary this time. Guess what the title of her diary is? Wang Ling, Super Chin and Little Peanut. Dopigua, my world's top 500 companies' dad's tutoring on spirit plants. Wang Ling, Super Chin, Little Peanut, everyone was busy writing in their diaries, and Wang Ling's wasn't going well either. It wasn't that he didn't know how to write, but that he always felt uneasy when he wrote. Suddenly, he raised his head. He had a strong feeling that Wang Ming was going to be in danger. Apart from the omen dream, all of Wang Ling's danger warnings were targeted at individuals. But there were times when brothers really did have a very strange connection, even if Wang Ming and Wang Ling weren't biological brothers, and were only cousins. But at the end of the day, the bloodline of the Wang clan flowed through his veins. This signal of danger was very strong, and almost instantly made Wang Ling nervous. He hurriedly looked in the direction of Wang Mingjuan's tent, and sure enough, he sensed killing intent permeating it. He was about to get up, but in the next moment, the world in front of him became clear, and he was actually sucked into a dark space. A moment later, a ray of golden light appeared in front of Wang Ling. It gathered bit by bit in front of him and finally coalesced into a person he was familiar with. Wang Ling hadn't expected the Heavenly Tao Golden Man to show up on its own. The Golden 3-inch Man said, "This is the Heavenly Tao space." Wang Ling sat down cross-legged and stared at the Golden 3-inch Man who was the embodiment of Heavenly Tao. He didn't quite understand what the Golden 3-inch Man was trying to do. His mind-reading ability couldn't work on Heavenly Tao. This was because the Heavenly Tao itself was in existence without emotions. The Golden 3-inch Man, the purpose of my trip here is to warn you that it's best if you don't make a move. Cupping his chin, Wang Ling instantly understood the Golden Man's purpose in coming here. He was probably talking about Wang Ming. The Golden 3-inch Man, this is a tribulation he has to experience in his life. If he can successfully overcome it, the heavens will bless him. But if he is obstructed by external forces, the tribulation he will encounter in the future will be even more troublesome and troublesome. Going against the heavens will never end well. Wang Ling said telepathically, so this is a notice. The Golden 3-inch Man, you can think of it that way. I just hope that things don't develop to the point of no return, otherwise it'll be too late for regrets. For the first time, Wang Ling felt that the Heavenly Tao was quite considerate. Wang Ling carefully sized up the Golden 3-inch Man in front of him and seemed to have noticed something, so he asked telepathically, you seem different from the heavenly Tao golden man I've seen before." The golden 3-inch man instantly broke out in a sweat. Back at the heavenly Tao conference, he had already said that this guy in front of him was extremely dangerous. Now that he had come into contact with him, the golden 3-inch man felt even more apprehensive. After a brief silence, he confessed, "The person who made an equivalent transaction with you before was my dad." Wang Ling was startled. The heavenly Tao actually had a family. The golden 3-inch man, "My dad should have informed you that you were going to make a move, but he didn't want to, so my grandfather beat him up. Now, I'll be the one to inform you." "Wang Ling, do all of you look the same?" The golden 3-inch man was silent. "We're not exactly the same, we're called golden 3-inch men. But a lot of people don't know what it means to be a golden 3-inch man." Wang Ling. The golden 3-inch man, "Indeed, we're all 3 inches tall, but there's still a difference between the Tower of Babel. The older the heavenly Tao, the longer it is. Of course, it's usually withdrawn into the abdomen." Chapter 741. When Wang Ling opened his eyes again, he was still in the tent. In other people's eyes, he was just in a daze. The heavenly Tao space was a kind of godly domain that ordinary people couldn't touch at all. Wang Ling hadn't expected that the heavenly Tao would actually personally appear this time to tell him not to interfere. At that moment, Wang Ling's gaze fell on Wang Ming, whose military tent was already brimming with murderous intent. Because he had received the heavenly Tao's notice, Wang Ling gave up on his plan to make a move. He tore off a piece of the diary and folded it into the shape of a paper crane. In fact, this was a life talisman that could be used to save Wang Ming's life when his life was in danger. However, the number of times the life talisman could be used was limited. It could only be used on the same person once every 49 days. If the heavenly Tao told him not to make a move, then he wouldn't make a move. It wouldn't be a problem if he helped him out in secret, right? This was what Wang Ling thought. While Wang Ling was still thinking, Super Chen's head suddenly poked over. He had wanted to see what theme Wang Ling had chosen for his summer camp diary, but when he looked over, he realized that Wang Ling was actually folding a paper crane, and his face instantly filled with despair. It's over, it's over. I'm afraid we're all going to fail this essay. Dopigua, why are you so pessimistic? Super Chin, Wang Ling has always been the equal share king in our class. Now that the equal share king is at his wit's end with this essay, we're definitely screwed. Look, Wang Ling is so bored that he's folding a paper crane. Wang Ling, Dopigua took a look and commented, "You don't say, Wang Ling's paper crane is pretty nice to fold. His little heart is quite deft with his hands." Wang Ling, inside the military tent, Ghosthead Blade was already intent on killing Wang Ling. This wasn't just an act of revenge. Because the body of his previous Lolita had already been beaten to a pulp. If he didn't find a new host within 3 days, he would be directly destroyed by the lightning tribulation as punishment. Thus, Ghosthead Blade was determined to get this Teacher Wang. In a situation where the original host's body had been beaten into a paste, his battle prowess had already been greatly reduced. There were many Foundation Establishment stage students here, but it was clear that the importance of those students was far inferior to this Teacher Wang. The person in front of him was an existence that was personally protected by that lord. Ghosthead Blade still couldn't quite believe it, but the head of state's action was already enough to prove Wang Ming's significance and value. Moreover, Ghosthead Blade had already set up a barrier. All movements and killing intent within the range of the military tent would be completely blocked. As an ordinary person, Wang Ming couldn't get out at all. Making up his mind, Ghosthead Blade decided to take action immediately. The saber light was extremely fast. In this situation, the other party was definitely not willing to become his host, so there was only one way: forcefully parasitizing. And this method was to kill the person who was about to become the parasite first. This stab was aimed directly at Wang Ming's heart. Against an ordinary person, there was no need for flashy skills. The best way to deal with them was to aim at their vitals and kill them in one hit. Wang Ming stared at Ghost Head Blade and smiled. "It won't be so easy for you to kill me, go to hell." The moment it pierced Wang Ming's chest, Ghost Head Blade's heart was filled with joy and excitement. His true form was a pitch-black dagger, and when it was stained with blood, Ghost Head Blade instantly felt extremely comfortable, as if he was soaking in a hot spring bath. But in the next moment, something unexpected happened. Wang Ming, who had already been successfully hit in his vitals, didn't fall, but actually turned into a wisp of sand in front of Ghost Head Blade and disappeared into the air. The next moment, Wang Ming's figure reappeared in another part of the tent. This was Wang Ming's brain deduction technique. "Wang Ming, it won't be so easy for you to kill me." This was Ghost Head Blade's first time seeing this technique, and he was indescribably amazed. This didn't look like an illusion spell, and it couldn't be one at all. The young man in front of him didn't have any spirit energy in his body, so how could he cast an illusion spell? The only explanation was that his mind had been controlled. "It seems that you have a very high intelligence." Ghost Head Blade stared at Wang Ming and picked up on some clues. He was very experienced and knowledgeable, and could think of the only possibility that could happen to an ordinary person. As long as an ordinary person was intelligent enough, they could use a technique to control other people's brains and create illusions. Ghost Head Blade had first learned about this technique when Wisdom Saint President Qi had battled the demon gods back then. It was just that Ghost Head Blade hadn't expected Wang Ming to actually know this technique. To be exact, this could also be considered a spell, but it didn't consume spirit energy, and was controlled purely with mental energy. Now, Ghost Head Blade suddenly understood why Wang Ming was so valued. This man's entire brain was a treasure. "I was careless, but this technique consumes a lot of mental energy. How much longer do you think you can last?" Ghost Head Blade sneered from the small pitch-black blade floating in the air. This had hit Wang Ming's sore spot. This was the second time in recent times that he had used the brain deduction technique. The last time was chapter 348. But this battle was different from the previous one, which was when Wang Ming had come prepared. At that time, Wang Ming had deliberately cast the spell ahead of time to cover the entire area. But now, he was using the brain deduction technique in a critical situation. That was to say, no matter how Wang Ming used the spell to avoid Ghost Head Blade's attack, he couldn't leave the military tent. And it just so happened that Ghost Head Blade had some understanding of this technique of his. As Ghost Head Blade said, as long as this battle dragged on, Wang Ming would definitely lose. When President Qi had used the brain deduction technique back then, he had used spirit energy and mental energy to share the damage to the brain deduction technique's mental energy. But Wang Ming couldn't do it. He remembered that the last time he had used this technique, he had instantly fainted because he had overused his brain. Thus, this wasn't a long-term solution. Wang Ming stared at Ghost Head Blade warily. Given the current situation, he could only take a gamble. He shouted, "Someone! Save me!" Ghost Head Blade sneered. "I've set up a barrier around this military tent. No one will come to save you." But before Ghost Head Blade's laughter died down, light suddenly surged from the ground of the military tent. Ghost Head Blade was alarmed. "This is an invisible teleportation array." The next moment, a beautiful figure directly broke through the ground. This teleportation formation was buried underground by Zhai Yin. As a qualified bodyguard, Zhai Yin fully utilized her omnipresence to the extreme. Wang Ming was delighted to see Zhai Yin appear, but he also couldn't help being startled. "What the hell, you're really here?" Zhai Yin grit her teeth. "I've been waiting for you underground for a long time. Hurry up and shout." Wang Ming. Chapter 742. Zhai Yin had appeared just in time. As a qualified bodyguard and a peeping Tom, Wang Ming was already used to Jia Yin's stalking behavior. He just needed to remember that wherever he was, Jia Yin would definitely be there. Jia Yin's appearance also caused Ghosthead Blade to be overjoyed. He now had another option. It was very clear that as someone from the magnificent Immortal Special Combat Brigade, Jia Yin's physical strength and attributes were far superior to Wang Ming's. This was an excellent host body that was hard to come by, and was even several times better than his previous lowly host. Ghosthead Blade was secretly delighted. If he could obtain this body and then snatch Wang Ming's brain, he would be invincible. Double host, it wasn't impossible, it was just that Ghosthead Blade hadn't been able to find an opportunity before. After snatching this Jia Yin's body, he would snatch the brain, and finally merge the two into a host body. This bold idea suddenly occurred to Ghosthead Blade. This was Jia Yin's first time seeing Ghosthead Blade's original body, but she was already more than familiar with his name. Back when she had still been in the magnificent Immortal Special Combat Brigade, Jia Yin had once been assigned a mission to hunt down Ghosthead Blade. Unfortunately, the mission had failed back then. Ghosthead Blade had been too cunning, and in the end, he had still managed to escape alive despite being surrounded by so many people. Several years ago, in the failed operation codenamed Project Ghost Hunt, one of the people in the magnificent Immortal Special Combat Brigade had died in the line of duty in pursuit of Ghosthead Blade. This had become an unsolved case that year, and until now, there had been no reasonable explanation for it. But when Jia Yin had been hiding underground, she had heard Ghosthead Blade's original body's account, and thoroughly understood the whole story back then. Back then, Ghosthead Blade had probably abandoned his previous host and forcibly formed a contract with that colleague who had died in the line of duty, and in the end, escaped undetected. The space inside the military tent was truly limited. Previously, Jia Yin had tried to break through the barrier set up by the Ghosthead Blade underground, but to her surprise, she had failed. Given how weak Ghosthead Blade's current body was, it shouldn't have been possible for him to set up such a powerful barrier. Hence, Jia Yin had been particularly cautious in her head-on confrontation with Ghosthead Blade in this battle. She was certain that this Ghosthead Blade definitely had a trump card that he hadn't used yet. In the blink of an eye, the Ghosthead Blade attacked again. His target was already Wang Ming, and Ghosthead Blade was sure that in order to protect Wang Ming, this female Special Forces soldier in front of him would definitely be at a disadvantage. Dang! There was a crisp sound of metal colliding. Jia Yin swiftly unsheathed a tactical military knife from her boots and sparred with Ghosthead Blade. For a moment, Ghosthead Blade launched a relentless attack, and Jia Yin used the tactical military knife to block it with all her might. Her arms, which she brandished rapidly, turned into a series of afterimages in front of Wang Ming's eyes, like countless flailing tentacles. "You're from Magnificent Immortal, right? It's been a long time since I've seen this blade technique." Ghosthead Blade chuckled as he attacked. Because it was just a small, pitch-black blade, no matter how Jia Yin slashed at it, the Ghosthead Blade did not feel any pain. After all, he was now a fragment of an ancient saber. Even if it was just a fragment, it was too naive to think that a mere tactical saber could deal with him. The incident back then, it was indeed you, Jia Yin frowned. She was well aware that the tactical military knife had a limited effect on Ghosthead Blade. Continuing to drag things out definitely wasn't the way to go. In this kind of battle, physical exhaustion was a big taboo. In this form, Ghosthead Blade could ignore the problem of physical exhaustion and injury, but it was different for them. Furthermore, she now had to use a clone to protect Wang Ming. For a moment, Jia Yin felt the greatest pressure. But it was her duty to protect Wang Ming. Even if she had to put her life on the line, Vanguard Blade. At that moment, Jia Yin's eyes darkened. She bit her finger hard and smeared blood on the tactical military knife in her hand. The next moment, she tossed the tactical military knife up, and it actually transformed into a blade array in the air, splitting into countless shadows that enveloped her and Wang Ming. In this way, Ghost Head Blade's plan to target Wang Ming had already been mostly dispelled. However, the duration of this saber array would not be too long. Before the blade array ended, Jia Yin had to think of a countermeasure to kill Ghost Head Blade in one blow. Special circumstances required special treatment. Jia Yin already couldn't care less about capturing Ghost Head Blade alive, especially now that Wang Ming was in danger. All she had to do was directly execute the criminal on the spot. But contrary to Jia Yin and Wang Ming's expectations, when Ghost Head Blade saw Jia Yin's blade array light up, he actually stopped his frenzied and fierce attack. Looks like it's about time. Ghost Head Blade smiled faintly. Jia Yin glared at him. What do you mean by this? As soon as she said this, Ghost Head Blade's body glowed with spirit light. In an instant, a dark purple multi-edged crystal appeared in the air. Jia Yin's eyes instantly widened. Wang Ming didn't say anything, but he already knew the origin of this polygonal crystal. This was currently the latest technology developed at home and abroad, but which had yet to be made available to the public, magic crystal technology. The magic crystal technique was a new technique that was based on talismans. It could seal designated high-level spells in crystals made of special materials. Sealed within the magic crystal in Ghost Head Blade's hand was a level 7 spell. Ghost Head Blade sneered. Lord Night Ghost Spirit Emperor already anticipated that this trip would be risky, so he formulated a risky plan. Even the commander of the master plan, President Dylan, doesn't know about this and is completely in the dark. Lord Night Ghost Spirit Emperor is only communicating with me. Jia Yin, what on earth do you want to do? In the fake remains, that bunch of good-for-nothings sacrificed their cells to summon an army of cells. What do you think will happen if I move that army into the remains? Jia Yin's expression was extremely unsightly. She knew about the army of cells in the fake remains. If they were all summoned here, it would definitely be chaos. All the students would be in danger. Holding the magic crystal, Ghost Head Blade laughed heartily. Let me tell you one more thing. This magic crystal is a twin magic crystal independently developed by Night Chief. It uses a spatial array for transmission. Have you heard of the Sea and Sky Array? Sea and Sky Array. Jia Yin frowned and looked at Wang Ming. Wang Ming, I don't know either. I only know the Sea and Sky Feast. Jia Yin, Lord Ghost Head Blade, they're already preparing to launch the Heavenly East satellite to purge the cells. At that moment, Lord Dark Fragrance's voice came from the dark purple magic crystal. Ghost Head Blade, what a pity, it's already too late. As soon as he said that, Ghost Head Blade directly crushed the magic crystal on the spot. In a split second, dense array patterns and talisman characters spread out like a spiderweb from Wang Ming's military tent. The Sea and Sky Array was also known as the 100-li Sea and Sky Array. It could instantly transmit everything within 100 li. Chapter 743. For a moment, the ground shook incessantly. All the students thought there was a major earthquake, and they ran out of the military tent to check on the situation. The complex array patterns and talisman characters on the ground spread out like vipers, startling many of the students who scuttled up trees like monkeys. Teacher, what is this? A lead teacher was directing order. Don't panic, everyone. These are the array patterns and talisman characters of an array. They look scary, but they're harmless to the body. On the other side, Wu Zhenjuan, who had been in charge of the preliminary interrogation of President Dylan and the others, as well as dozens of teachers who had been involved in the operation plan, came out of the military tent one after another. All of them had very ugly expressions on their faces. Who would have thought that something like this would still happen in the end? Wu Zhenjuan crouched down and carefully analyzed the array patterns and talisman characters under his feet. Senior Immortal, what kind of array is this? A lead teacher asked. This is the Sea and Sky Array, also known as the 100 Sea and Sky Array. It's the highest grade 7 transmission array. Wu Zhenjuan frowned. Generally speaking, to set up this kind of array, you need to set it up at least half a month in advance within a radius of 100 li, and then link it up in a line. But the remains have only just opened, so it's clearly impossible to set it up in advance, so this 100 Sea and Sky Array is an instant one. Many of the lead teachers were enlightened. As the chief commander of the teachers appointed by Huaxiao Alliance this time, it could only be said that Wu Zhenjuan was in the end Wu Zhenjuan. In just a few words, he had completely analyzed the current situation. Furthermore, Wu Zhenjuan could already tell that the person who had summoned the array definitely had the rumored magic crystal. This was a new type of technology that had yet to be clearly announced in various countries. It could seal high-level spells in crystals, and when necessary, they could be crushed to instantly cast spells. On the side, Wang Ling also followed a group of students up the tree. Although he wasn't afraid of the magic array under his feet, he still chose to go with the flow. This was the reaction a normal foundation establishment student should have, otherwise it would definitely look very strange. The truth was that he had been observing the movements in the military tent the whole time. The moment Ghost Head Blade took out the magic crystal, Wang Ling had already guessed that something bad was going to happen. Of all the dark forces they had come into contact with so far, it could only be said that Night Chief was indeed the greatest threat. That was because Night Chief was a foreign power to begin with. Even Huaxiao Nation's officials were unable to directly root out this organization. Even if this group of members was overthrown at home, as long as their overseas headquarters still existed, Night Chief would still be able to get away with it. Thus, it would be best if this incident could attract the attention of the International Cultivation Police Department. Now that Night Chief was planning to make a move on the students, this was the best reason to report it to the International Cultivation Police Department. But Wang Ling didn't plan to make a move, because there were enough teachers present to ensure the students' safety. These teachers were all top-notch experts. Moreover, among this group of experts, there was an important figure hidden behind them. Wang Ling's gaze fell indifferently on a middle-aged man not far away. He knew. This lord was about to make his move. At the same time, Huaxiao Alliance's headquarters was also alarmed by this situation. 100 secrets and one careless mistake. President Xi put both hands on the table, leaving a deep palm print on it. He could no longer maintain his composure at the scene in front of him. He actually possesses a magic crystal? The other 10 great generals, who were standing beside them, were shocked as well. It would not be an exaggeration to say that Ghost Head Blade bringing out this magic crystal was something that no one had anticipated. President Xi made an emergency response. The moment he discovered that the Sea and Sky Array had been activated, he immediately ordered General Bai to join forces with the Songhai Mahjong Squad and Huaxiao Alliance cultivators to set up a protective barrier. On the other side, he would remotely mobilize the Heavenly E satellite to launch a Heavenly E bomb in space to wipe out the summoned Cell army in one go. The Heavenly E bomb was extremely powerful, but General Bai was on the fake remains. As long as the barrier was set up, casualties and losses in the fake remains could be minimized. Even if Huaxiao Alliance cultivators were affected by the Heavenly E bomb, it would at least be a lot better than if the students were hurt. There was nothing he could do about it. How long until the Heavenly E satellite is activated? President Xi asked anxiously, his cheeks already drenched in cold sweat. Lord President, the Heavenly E satellite is still in the charging stage, and will need another 5 minutes. But the Sea and Sky Array will be activated smoothly in another minute. A technician said. So fast. General E was astonished. President Xi frowned deeply. The spells sealed in the magic crystal are all built-in spells that have already been set up. Whenever they're used, they're cast instantly. It looks like it's already too late. Lord President, what should we do now? The technician asked. 1. Immediately inform the special operations team led by Audjua to cooperate with the lead teachers to evacuate the students. 2. Request His Excellency the Head of State to make a move. It would be best if he could destroy this sea and sky array and interrupt the transmission. President Xi said resolutely. But this would be extremely difficult. The sea and sky array was the most powerful level 7 spell array, and also the most difficult to destroy. Because it covered such a huge area, finding the core array pattern was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Even the head of state might not be able to find it. But now, it seemed that there was no other way. Audjua soon received news from President Xi. Because most of the troops were stationed deep in the forest, they had been searching for them for a long time. Now that they were almost there, they hadn't expected a new unforeseen event. Now, the whole forest was like a bouncing trampoline as every inch of the ground shook. Fatty Luo jumped up and down along with the vibrations. The dark sect this time is probably richer than Immortal Mansion. They've even revealed their undisclosed technology first. Don't tell me they have their own research team behind them. This is a rebellion. Audjua sighed. This was a classic case of not being afraid of fighting with hooligans, but afraid of hooligans being cultured. Watching Fatty Luo jump around, Little Silver felt a little bad in his heart. Mr. Luo, please stop jumping. Are you dancing on shit? Fatty Luo, Audjua. Now isn't the time to joke around. We have to think of a way to protect the children first. What's the plan? Fatty Luo asked. Audjua cupped his chin in his hand and thought for a bit, then he gazed at the bandaged girl next to him. Wuji, can you move the entire array? Wuji shook her head. Do you want me to die of exhaustion? It's very tiring to move such a large array. No way, no way. At that moment, Audjua took out a ring and smiled at Wuji. Wuji, I advise you to be kind. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal gave me 5 of the 10 flames of purification previously. Could he still give this thing away? Wuji's face instantly changed. Yes, Master, I'll go right away. Chapter 744. This was an instantaneous sea and sky array, and it was almost impossible to stop it midway. There were only 2 solutions in this situation. 1. Find the core array pattern and destroy the foundation of the great array so that it couldn't be stabilized and thus disintegrated. Otherwise, as long as the cell summoning array on the fake remains existed, the summoned cells would be continuously transmitted over. But the sea and sky array was too huge, and the array pattern was extremely complicated. It was almost impossible to find the core array pattern in a short period of time. The second solution was to find a way to move the sea and sky array elsewhere, and then use a large-scale spell to directly destroy it. This seemed to be the most feasible method at the moment. However, it would cause serious damage to the real remains itself. On the fake remains side, Lord Dark Fragrance, who had used the cells at work spell to summon cells, looked at the dozen or so Night Chief members who had already completely withered. Back then, Lord Dark Fragrance had suggested using cells to summon cells to save his life, but this move was extremely harmful to the body, and wasn't just as simple as shortening one's lifespan. The reason why it was said to shorten one's lifespan was completely a stopgap measure. In normal circumstances, summoning 1 or 2 cells to do battle would indeed consume some lifespan, which wasn't a big deal. But for such a large number of white blood cells and red blood cell armies, the problem wasn't as simple as burning lifespan. Under such a powerful summoning spell, all the cells of a person would ultimately be sacrificed, and all the organs in the body would be consumed. Every drop of vital essence in the body would be completely burned away. As the master of the array, Dark Fragrance could naturally control the array to protect himself and be safe. He and Ghost Head Blade had already received a secret order from Night Ghost Spirit Emperor to use this special method in a special situation. This move was very much like throwing caution to the wind, but it also posed a huge problem for Huaxiao Alliance. Because destroying the sea and sky array would damage the real remains no matter what. In the last few years, Huaxiao Nation had been relying on their words to protect Beast King's remains to firmly control the entrance to Devil Valley's secret land. If this sea and sky array was handled improperly now, as long as it caused some international public opinion, other countries would definitely take advantage of the situation and apply to the International United Cultivators Association to jointly manage Devil Valley. That would truly be the point where it would be hard to get off. At this moment, within the range of the sea and sky array in the forest, a large expanse of thick fog rose. This was a sign that the array formation had been activated. Many of the leading teachers began to organize the students to retreat into the rainbow glass box. This was the most important thing to do now. As long as the students retreated, the teachers could fight on their own without having to worry about the consequences. These summoned cells were huge in size, and every single one of them was extremely strong. Even the weakest one was at the gold core stage. Even if the Foundation Establishment stage students joined forces, they would only be sending themselves to their deaths. The head of state stood in the void and looked down at the sea and sky array beneath his feet. This array covered 1/7 of the dense forest in the east. 1/7 of the forest sounded like a small portion, but there were still many extinct resources within. The portion that was open to the students today was just the tip of the iceberg in this dense forest. A small piece of land that was not even 1/7 of the total territory. Destroying the core array pattern was the best way to prevent the remains from being destroyed as much as possible. But this sea and sky array had clearly been specially processed. An array expert could make a big deal out of the structure of the array pattern and set up many fake array patterns to conceal the true core. Furthermore, these fake array patterns were no less complex than the real ones. It was like the fake wires in a bomb. The slightest mistake could set off a chain reaction. Unless they were all destroyed in one go, even the head of state wouldn't dare act rashly. He could see that there was something fishy about these fake array patterns. If he destroyed one by mistake, the fake array patterns would rapidly multiply and spread. Seeing that the students in the forest had been safely pulled back into the rainbow glass box, the head of state heaved a sigh of relief. It was likely that the military tents below would all go to waste this time. The children had been evacuated in such a hurry that there was no time at all to retrieve the tents. Is there any way to lock onto the core? The Huaxiao Alliance Command Center received the head of state's question. President Qi sighed. For the time being, there was nothing he could do. If he had been at the scene, he might have been able to use the brain deduction technique to find the true core array pattern. Because everything in the deduction technique was an illusion of the brain, it wouldn't have the slightest effect even if he destroyed the wrong array pattern. But now, unless he could use the heavenly eye to correctly identify the array pattern, all his hopes now rested on Wang Ming alone. As President Qi's disciple, Wang Ming naturally knew the pros and cons of this matter. They had to find the core array pattern in order to minimize the damage to the remains. In the military tent, Zhai Yin, who had activated Vanguard Blade, was evenly matched with Ghost Head Blade. This was a very difficult opponent. Although Wang Ming had lived with Zhai Yin for less than half a year, their tacit understanding had unknowingly risen to a new level because they had been together day and night. Now wasn't the time for Wang Ming to be trapped in the tent, otherwise his brain deduction technique wouldn't be able to cover the entire sea and sky array at all. After noticing Wang Ming's meaningful glance, Zhai Yin changed his line of attack and deliberately revealed some flaws. Ghost Head Blade's killing intent burst forth as he did his best to kill Zhai Yin first. In the next moment, Ghost Head Blade, which had turned into a small pitch-black blade, smashed heavily into the barrier which he had set up, and it instantly cracked. Zhai Yin borrowed the force of the attack to break the barrier in one go. Success! Jia Yin cried out excitedly. She stayed by Wang Ming's side and continued to stand guard for him. Almost the instant the barrier was broken, Wang Ming had already sat down cross-legged. He activated the brain deduction technique to the maximum and summoned the heavenly material sword in an attempt to find the specific location of the core array pattern. At that moment, the army of white blood cells and red blood cells which had been transmitted from the fake remains had already sprung up from the ground like bamboo shoots after a rain. This was undoubtedly a huge obstacle to Wang Ming's search for the core array pattern. There are actually so many of them, many of the teachers who had stayed behind marveled one after another. The students no longer had anything to worry about. Under Wu Zhenjuan's command, they all stayed behind to stand guard for Wang Ming. Once Wang Ming found the core array pattern, they would gather all their firepower to destroy it in one go. However, the number of white blood cells, red blood cells and even macrophages made everyone feel like they were in a sea of people. The number of these summoned cells was too huge. There were actually more than 10,000 of them. Most of the cells didn't have high realms, but because there were so many of them, it was extremely troublesome to deal with them. That Lord Dark Fragrance from the fake remains had already been transmitted over through the sea and sky array to meet up with Ghost Head Blade. Brother Dark Fragrance is really skilled. Ghost Head Blade looked at the vast army and praised him from the bottom of his heart. Just a small trick, Dark Fragrance replied. The two of them stood in the distance and watched from a distance. They didn't notice Wang Ling's clone standing not too far away from them, staring at the army of cells with dead fish eyes. Just as all the teachers were discussing telepathically how to split up to face the enemy, in the next moment, something that no one could have imagined happened. The cells which had just emerged actually shrank back. Chapter 745. A tremendous oppressive force descended from the sky and swept over the scene, making it impossible to tell what on earth was going on. Who was it? For a moment, all the teachers leading the team, including Princeps, who was about to attack, were deeply shocked. They could feel that there was a powerful master releasing his domineering aura at an extremely close distance from them. And the most terrifying thing was that this domineering aura actually caused the group of summoned activated cells to shrink back one by one. It could be said that these cells already had a very strong desire to live. Ghost Head Blade and Lord Dark Fragrance also had shocked expressions on their faces. The greatest expert they had locked onto was undoubtedly that lord who had disguised himself as head of State 001. But this spiritual pressure clearly wasn't released by him. At the scene, there was a hidden expert who was out of everyone's expectations. In Huaxiao Alliance's headquarters, the 10 generals present couldn't help getting up one by one as they stared in shock at the scene in front of them. After this spiritual pressure of unknown origin descended, President Qi asked the technicians to immediately activate all the gauges to monitor the data. In the end, all 120 spiritual pressure gauges in all of Huaxiao Alliance were filled to the brim. The needle was directly pushed to its highest peak. Furthermore, more than 10 spiritual pressure gauges couldn't withstand the pressure and exploded in less than a few seconds after they were filled to the brim. President Qi's face turned pale with shock. These spiritual pressure gauges were connected to space satellites and had very strong negative pressure. Furthermore, they were connected in series. Even if the head of state got angry, he could only fill 60 or so gauges at most. But now, not only were these 120 gauges all filled to the brim, more than 10 had exploded. Old Qi, this isn't the first time, right? Dressed in his exercise clothes, General Yi floated in the air and pinched his mustache as he looked solemnly at the scene in front of him. Next to him, the other 10 generals, including Marshal Jiang, also had puzzled expressions on their faces. Everyone's hearts were as clear as a mirror. Because this wasn't the first time this had happened. The most recent time, during the joint military training exercise for the 6 schools back then, there had been a situation where all the spiritual pressure gauges had been filled to the brim and then exploded. At that time, President Qi had been the one directing it from behind the scenes. Everyone had thought that the gauges had malfunctioned, so they hadn't paid too much attention to it. However, after the maintenance, the technicians in charge of maintenance said that there were no problems with the instrument, and that it was a normal phenomenon caused by the overload of spiritual pressure. At that time, this had become an unsolved case with many suspicious points. This was because General E was the only one of the 10 generals who had been sent to participate in the joint military training exercise for the 6 schools, and his limit was 40 spans. The old devil, who had yet to reach his prime, was about 20 years old. Therefore, even if the two of them were fighting at that time, it was impossible for all the spiritual pressure gauges to be filled up. As expected, has that mysterious expert shown up again? President Chi frowned deeply. Including the time during the military training for the 6 schools, this should already be the 3rd time this had happened. The earliest time was when the gate between worlds had descended 6 years ago, around the time that the sky-swallowing toad had been defeated, and there had been a peak in spiritual pressure. The whole of Huaxiao Alliance took the mysterious expert's attacks very seriously. But to everyone's surprise this time, including President Chi's, no one had expected this mysterious expert to actually be among the summer camp's lineups. This person has attacked us again and again in secret, so he probably isn't willing to show his face. But this just happens to expose his identity. General E said. After the summer camp is over, you can make a list of all the teachers involved in this operation, and we'll investigate them one by one. General Yi's first instinct was that this mysterious expert was among the teachers. Because all the students had already been withdrawn into the rainbow glass box at the scene, the teachers leading the team were undoubtedly the most suspicious. President Chi nodded. Looking at the current situation, this person has attacked us again and again, so he should be a friend and not a foe. But he's hiding in the dark and we can't control him. That's absolutely out of the question. There were still a few days left in the summer camp. Since it had already been proven that this mysterious expert was among them, this was undoubtedly the best time to ferret him out. Because the head of state was with them this time, if the head of state was allowed to test the waters, no matter how powerful that expert was, he would definitely give himself away. It was just that they would never have thought. The mysterious expert, who could cause more than 120 spiritual pressure gauges to be filled up, was just one of Wang Ling's clones. Wang Ling had promised the Heavenly Tao that he wouldn't take the initiative to make a move, but after seeing the sea and sky array, he had second thoughts. Right now, he probably wasn't taking the initiative to make a move, he had been forced to defend himself. Besides, he was really keeping a low profile this time. He had just had his clone force the summoned cell army back, which shouldn't be too excessive. On the other side, under the protection of Zhai Yin and the many teachers, Wang Ming's brain worked at lightning speed as he used the brain deduction technique to search for the core array pattern. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, his whole body flushed red because his brain was working at high speed. Blue veins popped out on his forehead as they pulsed, which was a ghastly sight to behold. Zhai Yin even wondered if Wang Ming's head would instantly burst like a balloon filled with air at the slightest touch. Since the cells summoned by Ghost Head Blade had been scared back by Wang Ling's clone, the pressure on the teachers leading the team was a lot less. They kept a close eye on Ghost Head Blade and Dark Fragrance, who weren't far away. Dark Fragrance was remotely controlling the summoning array, and had activated the death-defying mode, intending to make a comeback. Just at that moment, Wang Ming opened his eyes. Found it. Seeing this, the head of state immediately pointed through the air and synchronized Wang Ming's memories with the minds of all the teachers leading the team. Everyone, attack. Gather all your firepower. Smash the core array pattern. In an instant, more than 10 teachers rushed out. Following the coordinates in Wang Ming's mind, they successfully found the location of the core array pattern. Boom 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 boom, endless light cannons and light waves shot out from the teachers' palms and magic weapons as they fired wildly at the core array pattern, sparing no effort. Want to destroy the array pattern? It won't be that easy. Ghost Head Blade was furious. Wang Ming had been completely surrounded by the iron bucket array just now, and Ghost Head Blade hadn't been able to find a chance to attack him at all. Now that most of the people had been sent out to attack the core array pattern, Ghost Head Blade knew his chance had come. He manipulated the pitch-black blade that he had transformed into to directly burrow into the ground, intending to launch a surprise attack from underground. Chapter 746. It was only in that moment that Ghost Head Blade realized that the soil in the real remains wasn't ordinary soil. He had directly touched it with his metal body, and his body had almost been corroded. Fortunately, he had reacted quickly, otherwise he would have been seriously injured if he had been underground for a few more seconds. After learning that the soil was corrosive, Ghost Head Blade immediately changed his mind and tried to launch another attack on Wang Ming. Wang Ming was now in a very dangerous situation. Because he had used up too much energy using the brain deduction technique earlier, he was now in a weak state. This state was a little like anemia, where his qi and blood were weak due to insufficient blood supply to his brain. He was sweating all over and his heart was racing. It was like a person who had suddenly stopped running at full speed, and Wang Ming felt uncomfortable all over. He was doing his best to adjust his breathing and control his heart rate. In this situation, a normal qi replenishing elixir wouldn't have much of an effect on him, because this was an injury caused by his mental strength. Brother Dark Fragrance, cover me. At that moment, Night Chief's forces had completely collapsed, and the only people who could salvage the situation were Ghost Head Blade and this Lord Dark Fragrance. Both of them were extremely difficult to deal with among Dark Network members. Sensing the killing intent, Zhai Yin immediately set up an army knife formation next to Wang Ming. Cell Proliferation Spell. Lord Dark Fragrance's hands formed a seal, and a white cyst-like substance immediately emerged on Ghost Head Saber's pitch-black blade. These cyst-like substances rapidly multiplied on Ghost Head Saber's body like bacteria, continuously replicating themselves, unexpectedly forming an extremely tough and resilient cell armor that could continuously regenerate. Ghost Head Blade didn't need to worry about anything else at all, he just needed to charge forward. His target was Wang Ming. The head of state's heart sank at this scene. He stretched out his hand to block the attack, but in the next moment, Lord Dark Fragrance, who had used the cell proliferation spell, suddenly raised his hand and shot out a purple wave of light. Was this a moving light wave? The head of state stared at Lord Dark Fragrance, whose eyes were fluctuating. His aura increased dramatically and was already completely different from before. The head of state stopped, but didn't gradually focus. Who goes there? Huaxiao Alliance headquarters. President Qi was also deep in thought at this scene as he thought of a high-level spell called the Cell Assimilation Spell. This was a kind of possession spell similar to a spirit ghost. As long as you obtained DNA beforehand, you could use this spell to possess a body from a distance. Most possession spells had a range, and the two bodies couldn't be too far apart, but the cell assimilation spell could ignore this limitation. However, there was a time limit. Under normal circumstances, the cell assimilation technique could only last 5 minutes at most when it was used to possess someone. This Lord Dark Fragrance was originally a biological scientist, and his research on cells was extremely thorough. He could even skillfully master a spell like the Cells at Work spell, so casting the cell assimilation spell couldn't be any easier. Who possessed this person? General Yi asked. President Qi sighed and said in a deep voice, looking at the current situation, the only one who can confront His Excellency the head of state head-on, is the leader behind Night Chief. Now, President Qi finally realized something. So all of this had been premeditated by Night Chief. From the sea and sky array to Night Ghost Spirit Emperor personally taking action, everything had been part of Night Chief's plan. Through Dark Fragrance's cell assimilation spell, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had successfully possessed Night Ghost Spirit Emperor. This was a memorable scene for Night Ghost Spirit Emperor because it was his first head-on confrontation with the head of state of Huaxiao Nation. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor stared at the head of state and sneered. Your Excellency's smokescreen is pretty good. That humanoid magic treasure was just a step away from deceiving me and crossing the sea. There was no need for superfluous movements at all in a showdown between experts. The two of them faced each other from a distance and didn't look like they were doing anything, but they were in fact competing in secret. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's intention was very clear. He knew that the time he could possess Wang Ming was limited, so he was deliberately stalling for time. In this situation, the head of state couldn't spare any extra effort to save Wang Ming, and could only rely on Jai Yin and the other lead teachers to ensure Wang Ming's safety. Get out of the way. The head of state stared at Night Ghost Spirit Emperor with a profound look in his eyes, and his body released a frightening pressure. Your Excellency can step over this venerable one first, and this venerable one will naturally step aside. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor laughed. He was completely unafraid. Both of them were true immortals, and judging from the initial clash of auras, the head of state was sure that this Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's strength was on par with his own. If they fought in the real remains, it would definitely be harmful, not beneficial. What was more, this was the first time Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was fighting an enemy while possessing him. Exposing too much definitely wasn't a good thing. What a pity. At that moment, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor suddenly sighed. What a pity that the humanoid magic treasure Your Excellency sent had such good defense, and self-destructed before we could analyze it. Otherwise, this venerable one would have studied it carefully, and then called a deity spirit car to send it back. In any case, it's just an old man robot that doesn't look very beautiful. No matter how beastly some deity spirit car drivers are, they probably won't go so far as to lay their hands on an old man. Hearing this, the head of state's face darkened. He did his best to maintain his composure. He knew that the other party was trying to goad him into making a move. For a moment, the confrontation between the two great experts was in a deadlock. Elsewhere, Ghost Head Blade advanced unimpeded under the cover of Night Ghost Spirit Emperor and Dark Fragrance's cell proliferation spell. For a moment, Jai Yin was under immense pressure. The lead teachers who had been left behind weren't as strong as her, and they lacked combat experience, so they had no idea what to do in the face of these menacing criminals. After receiving Wang Ming's coordinates, most of the teachers attacked the core array pattern. As long as the sea and sky array didn't disappear for even a moment, the real remains would be in danger of being destroyed. Space slash. Ghost Head Blade dashed forward as fast as a beam of light. The moment he got close, Jai Yin's expression abruptly changed. It was actually a space slash. This was a purely suicidal saber technique. Jai Yin never thought that Ghost Head Blade, who had been clamoring for a host earlier, would actually use such a suicidal blade technique in the blink of an eye. Go to hell. Ghost Head Blade let out a low sneer, and the blade cut through the cracks in the air as it directly pierced through Jai Yin's body. But contrary to Ghost Head Blade's expectations, it seemed that Jai Yin hadn't been hit. Her body appeared on the other side. Jai Yin had been saved by Wang Ming's brain deduction technique. Ghost Head Blade was flustered and exasperated, but he didn't stop attacking. Just as he was about to attack Wang Ming, the latter suddenly clutched his head and let out a pained roar. The next moment, a black hole rose from the top of Wang Ming's head. Chapter 747. August 1st, Tuesday in the 15th week of the semester. Wang Ming had disappeared on his birthday. To be exact, the exact time of his disappearance should have been a little earlier. The summer camp activities had to be temporarily suspended. Right now, the most important task was to send someone to search for Wang Ming. Of course, the students didn't know about Wang Ming's disappearance. Most of them had been in the glass box when it happened, and had no idea what was going on in the outside world. As the chief commander of the teachers, Wu Xinjuan's explanation for the temporary suspension of the summer camp was that a group of foreign rebels had been caught yesterday, and they needed to assign some people to conduct a preliminary interrogation. After the interrogation was over, the summer camp would resume as usual. Apart from Wang Ling and Fang Xing, no one else in the line of students knew the truth. The only good news was that the sea and sky array had been dispelled, and Lord Dark Fragrance, who was responsible for the cell summoning, had also been taken down by the head of state after the effects of the cell assimilation spell ended. After that, Audiobook's special operations team arrived and entered the rainbow glass box to attend the meeting with Wu Xinjuan. Zhai Yin was supposed to be at the meeting, but because of the battle and her deep self-blame, the moment Wang Ming was sucked into the black hole, she had collapsed. The medical team had no choice but to give her a strong sedative and force her to rest. In the conference room inside the rainbow glass box, Audiobook took Little Silver and Fatty Luo with him, while Wuji transformed into her original form and was stored in Audiobook's storage space. Right now, Limitless Sword God's identity could not be revealed, or else it would attract unnecessary trouble. Wu Xinjuan, let me introduce these two people to Mr. Luo Chuang and Mr. Silver, the Special Operations Team's right-hand men this time. I met them on the Cultivation Forum, and they're very good friends with me and Great Death Courting Senior. Audiobook introduced Fatty Luo and Little Silver. Wu Xinjuan nodded. Fatty Luo and Little Silver had to have been specially vetted by the authorities to be able to enter the remains as part of the Special Operations Team, so Wu Xinjuan hadn't asked too much about their identities. In fact, as soon as he heard that they were friends of that Great Death Courting Senior, Wu Xinjuan knew that there was basically nothing wrong with them. Great Death Courting Senior was a famous person in the circle. His realm was not high, but his ability to court death was strong. All these years, not only had he been fighting evil forces everywhere, he had also been busy doing charity work. Although Wu Xinjuan hadn't had any special contact with Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, he had heard about him through various grapevines. To sum it up in one sentence, not only did this person like to court death, his family also had a mind. Clearing his throat, Wu Xinjuan said, "Next, I'll explain to Director Zhuo what's happening now." This was a secret meeting for Audiobook's Special Operations Team, and Wu Xinjuan and Audiobook's team were the only ones in the huge conference room. Wu Xinjuan, thanks to Teacher Wang, the sea and sky array has already been broken. However, a small number of activated white blood cells, red blood cells, and macrophages are still roaming around the ruins. We've already sent some teachers to track them down. The Dark Network fugitive, codenamed Dark Fragrance, gave these cells a new order before he was arrested, asking them to destroy the spirit plants. This was already a broken pot that had been smashed. Can't we destroy the summoning array? Audiobook sighed. Wu Xinjuan shook his head. Although the summoning array in the fake remains was destroyed through the sea and sky array's transmission, the activated cells that were teleported to the real remains weren't affected by the array's range. I see. Audiobook nodded. Wu Xinjuan, the second thing I want to talk about is that Teacher Wang and Ghosthead Blade were sucked into the black hole during the operation this time. According to President Qi of Huaxiao Alliance, this black hole wasn't a space fissure formed by the space slash, but a special side effect of Teacher Wang's brain deduction technique when it was overloaded. Audiobook, Little Silver and Fatty Luo were blank when they heard this, and didn't quite understand what he meant. Wu Xinjuan thought for a bit, then gave a simpler explanation. Actually, to put it simply, Director Zhuo can understand it as Teacher Wang's mental fluctuations affecting the real world because his brain was overworking, thus creating the legendary brain hole. That black hole is actually a brain hole. Audiobook was silent for a long time. After a while, he looked up at Wu Xinjuan. What are Teacher Wang's chances of survival? He wanted to hear Huaxiao Nation's official data on Wang Ming's chances of survival. Actually, Audiobook knew that there was a high chance that Wang Ming wouldn't die at all. After all, he was a man backed by Shifu. Furthermore, When Audjua had seen Shifu's relaxed expression during the meeting, his heart had instantly become as clear as a mirror. He speculated that Shifu had most likely given Wang Ming a resurrection token. Wu Xinjuan's face darkened at Audjua's words. After a while, he looked up at Audjua. A brain hole is also a special form of a spatial storm. If a cultivator falls into one and isn't prepared, their chances of survival are less than 30%, unless they're almighties at or above itinerant immortal level, whose physical qualities allow them to travel through the spatial storm. Given that Teacher Wang is immortal, his chances of survival are very low. After saying that, Wu Xinjuan raised his little finger. This is Teacher Wang's current chances of survival, Audjua, 1%. Wu Xinjuan, 1 in 10,000, Audjua. By the time the meeting ended, it was already the wee hours of August 1st. 2/3 of the teachers in the rainbow glass box had been sent out to look for Wang Ming, even if many of them knew in their hearts that his chances of survival were very slim, and there was probably no one here who was more familiar with the spatial storm than Wu Ji. It was true that a spatial storm was very scary. If it was just a mortal body, it would be torn to shreds in an instant once it was sucked in. But Wu Ji had another opinion. A brain hole isn't the only thing that can lead to a spatial storm, it's just that there's a higher probability of it forming, Wu Ji said. There's another situation, and that's spatial turbulence. If it's in a spatial turbulence, Mr. Wang's chances of survival will be much higher. Space turbulence was a spatial anomaly with a very low probability of occurring. People who were swallowed by it would drift in space for a very long time, and in the end would be spat back into their original world. Of course, the position in which they would be spat out would definitely change. It was random. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.